Chapter 1046, An Iron Chicken That Can Also Pluck Feathers. 1. The title of this chapter is based on a Chinese saying about an iron chicken from whom no feathers can be plucked, referring to a stingy person. Almost in the same moment that the world projection vanished, the three women decided that war should begin. Thus, they caused their own world to approach from its distant location, something that would take time. In another location in the heavens was another world, the world with the 9 suns and the enormous statue. It was not real, but rather a projection, in much the same way that the world the three women were in was a projection. The true worlds were actually in a location far, far away. In that projected world of 9 suns, a decisive, sinister voice was also speaking, the voice of a woman. It will take hundreds of years for the other side to arrive. It's the same for us. This time spare no cost. We must succeed. The woman's voice was venomous and seemed to be filled with a coldness and disregard for all living beings other than those that currently surrounded her. As it echoed out, the world of 9 suns gradually began to distort and then vanish. Meanwhile, back in the mountain and sea realm, in the 9th mountain and sea, Meng Hao was completely oblivious to all of these things. He was currently frowning at the parrot. Finally, he gave a cold harumph. Although he had felt a bit guilty before about what happened, seeing the parrot now caused him to glare angrily. Before he could say anything, however, the parrot blinked, cleared its throat, and then flapped its wings as it flew up into the air. The copper mirror seemed to have lost any ability to float or fly and clanked to the ground. The parrot flew out of the residence, seemingly without a care in the world. However, deep in its heart was a mass of anxiety. Calamity is coming. I screwed up. I never would have thought the other 2 powers would be so persistent. Screw it, I don't care anymore. In any case, Meng Hao is the master of the mirror this time, so it has nothing to do with Lord Fifth. Worst case scenario, I'll flee and sleep for a while again. Finally, the parrot cleared its thoughts, pushing away all these vexatious worries. Its eyes then began to shine brightly as it looked at the demonic cultivators in the pool of water. Once again it began to envision swapping them for numerous furry concubines, and the blissful days that would ensue. Ha ha ha, Lord Fifth is back. Now all of you listen up and behave. Lord Fifth is going to teach you a song. The parrot whistled through the air toward the group of demonic cultivators. Come, come, let's sing together. The name of this little tune is I'm a Good Little Seafood Dish. If you sing well, Lord Fifth has a reward waiting for you. Back in the residence, Meng Hao was frowning. Although the parrot had made light of what had happened, Meng Hao had practiced cultivation for many years and was adept at analyzing matters. Everything he had seen regarding the copper mirror, plus the parrot's expression, filled him with a sense of foreboding. I'm afraid something really bad is going to happen, he murmured. He looked at the copper mirror and thought back to the 3 images he had seen. Finally, he took a deep breath. More than ever, he felt that the origin of the copper mirror was shrouded in some incredibly profound mystery. Just where did it come from? Other than duplicating things, it definitely has other magical divine abilities that I don't know of. It seems everyone wants it, even the most powerful experts. They'll do anything to win it. Well then, what exactly is it? Perhaps Mountain and Sea Mirror isn't its real name. If the copper mirror is so mysterious and so powerful, then why did it end up broken? Also, who broke it? And why? One question after another popped up in Meng Hao's mind, seemingly without any train of logic connecting them. After a long moment of thought, his eyes flickered with bright light. Regardless of what mysteries lie within the copper mirror, or where it came from, I have it now. Therefore, I will inevitably be involved in whatever quarrels erupt over it. Based on my current cultivation base, if something like that happens, I'll most likely be killed. I wouldn't be able to lift a hand against the people who want it. Therefore, the most important thing for me now is still cultivation. Only by becoming stronger and more powerful can I have a chance of surviving through whatever struggles are coming in the future. That's the only way that I can ensure that my own Tao will continue on. He closed his eyes and calmed his mind and heart. When he opened them again, he made a grasping motion, causing the copper mirror to fly into his hand. He looked at it for a moment. Then, without any further hesitation, pulled out some spirit stones and immortal jade and began to feed them into the mirror. He did not give up on his original idea, which was to duplicate the paragon's blood. With enough paragon's blood, I can get a full, complete drop. Something like that is incredibly rare and will help me to successfully absorb that first nirvana fruit. He took a deep breath, and his eyes gleamed with passion. The path to the ancient realm lay before him, and the only way to be qualified to open the door to that path was to absorb and fuse all 4 of the nirvana fruits he possessed. Then he could strike the ancient bell and light his soul lamps. He would use the flame of his life force like the wind of the world to extinguish each of his soul lamps in turn. Thus he would achieve a realm in which the lamps were snuffed out, yet he still lived. One spirit stone after another sank into the copper mirror. It was like a black hole that could gobble up spirit stones indefinitely. However, flickering light could be seen with each spirit stone it ate up. As the rate of flickering increased, Meng Hao appeared calm on the outside, but his heart was twisted in knots. Although he was used to how the copper mirror devoured spirit stones, and also used to how he would often acquire a huge sum of spirit stones only to obediently feed them into the copper mirror. Even so, he was still torn. His heart hurt, and gradually, he simply couldn't remain calm anymore. All of the spirit stones he had acquired from the 3 great Taoist societies, trial by fire, disappeared into the copper mirror, leaving his face completely ashen. His eyes were bright red, and yet, like a gambling addict, he continued to throw in spirit stones. The copper mirror glowed with increasingly intense light until finally, a second identical vial of Paragon's bloods appeared. He let out a long breath. He was shaken, but shook off the urge to mourn his spirit stones and looked the 2 vials over closely, then began to laugh uproariously. If Granny Nine and the others could see these 2 vials, they would be shocked beyond belief. In fact, they might even go mad and unleash an unprecedented catastrophe. They were identical. Both the vial itself and the blood inside were completely identical. This was almost like creating something from nothing, a mystical scene of something appearing from thin air that filled Meng Hao's heart with incredible excitement. Also, he was now able to tell for certain that, after acquiring that fragment of the mirror's face from the ancient demon immortal sect, the duplicating powers of the mirror had actually become stronger. Things that previously could not be duplicated were now possible to duplicate. Meng Hao could even sense that one day, if all the fragments of the mirror were brought together and the mirror was whole, then he could even duplicate the heavens or an entire world realm. He could duplicate anything. His heart pounded rapidly, and a brilliant gleam appeared in his eyes. However, at the same time, his heart remained vigilant. He knew that if anyone found out that he had this mirror, it would mean a huge catastrophe for him. Actually, that was something he had long since been very well aware of. From the moment he had acquired the copper mirror and discovered its function, when he had first started down the path of cultivation, he had always borne that in mind. After packing away the duplicate vial of Paragon's blood, he used the original to continue duplicating. Time passed by slowly. During the 3 days that passed, Meng Hao acted as if he were bedeviled, constantly feeding spirit stones and immortal jade into the copper mirror. Outside of the residence, the sound of singing echoed up into the air. The voices sounded disgruntled and not very willing to sing, but Meng Hao didn't even notice it. He was completely focused on the copper mirror and the Paragon's blood. When he ran out of spirit stones completely, he used immortal jade. Eventually, he ended up duplicating 7 portions of Paragon's blood. Finally, he ran out of immortal jade. By that point, his eyes were crimson. He waved his hand, sending his identity command medallion flying out into the hands of the puppet boy, who by now had gone outside to wait for further orders. In compliance Meng Hao's divine will, he immediately flew away as if he were sentient. He passed through the shield, and the pool it had formed to act as Meng Hao's representative in procuring cultivation resources from the 9 Seas God world. The 3 old-timers had promised Meng Hao that all of the resources in the 9 Seas God world were open to him. Although they hadn't agreed to literally give him anything he wanted, it was still an unprecedented guarantee when it came to cultivation. Not too much time passed before the puppet boy returned with a bag of holding. Immediately, Meng Hao resumed duplicating the Paragon's blood. He would do anything in his power to fulfill his desire of fully absorbing the nirvana fruits. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time passed, and Meng Hao barely ever set foot outside. All he did was work on duplicating the Paragon's blood. Soon, he didn't have 7 portions, but rather 50. That much Paragon's blood was something that even the 9 Seas God world would have a hard time coming up with. Furthermore, Meng Hao had laid his hands on a virtual sea of spirit stones and immortal jade. He didn't even calculate how much it was in total, mostly because he didn't dare to. If he did, the pain in his heart would surely cause him to cough up a mouthful of blood. Still not enough, he thought, his eyes completely bloodshot. He waved his hand, sending the puppet boy out once again to get some cultivation resources. This time, the puppet boy didn't come back as quickly as he had before. Meng Hao waited for a while, and when he still didn't return, had no choice but to rise to his feet. Just when he was about to walk out of the residence, his face flickered as he looked toward the leftmost stone chamber of secluded meditation. Almost in the moment that he looked over, rumbling sounds echoed out from within the stone chamber. Next, the stone door shook, and a huge crack appeared in its surface, as if some incredibly powerful force were smashing against it from inside. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he used the power of the life-death hex to peer into the stone chamber. What he saw was that, where before there had been 10 ghost eye beetles, now there were none. Shockingly, an enormous eye had appeared inside the chamber in their stead. The eye was surrounded by 10 tentacles, which whipped around rapidly. There was also a black glow that radiated out from it, which repeatedly slammed into the stone door. Upon closer examination, it was possible to see that inside of the ghost eye was a tiny pitch-black imp, sitting there cross-legged. The imp had no eyes, a huge mouth, and strangest of all, it had a black carapace on its back. 1. In Chinese, a beetle is literally an armored carapaced shelled insect. Apparently, the bizarre ghost eye was actually created by the black-shelled imp. Meng Hao's eye widened as he also realized that, all of a sudden, his life-death hex was losing its grip. Almost in the same moment that the life-death hex was weakening, a huge boom could be heard as the stone door collapsed. The ghost eye burst out, emitting a piercing, deafening shriek that echoed out in all directions. The ghost eye then proceeded to charge directly toward Meng Hao, as if to consume him. Chapter 1047, Magic Pod Soldiers. The stone door collapsed further, transforming into a haze of fragments that blasted toward Meng Hao. Amidst the flying rubble was the ghost eye, screaming as it charged in attack. Apparently it wanted to consume or possess him. There was also a blast of cold air from within the stone chamber. In his peripheral vision, Meng Hao could see that frost had built up inside, as if it were the dead of winter. Even more shocking was that the frost was green. It's poisonous. Meng Hao was a bit shocked by the weakening of the life-death hex. However, in the blink of an eye, he had recovered his composure. Eyes flickering, he did nothing to evade but instead waved his hand out in front of him. Instantly, his immortal meridian surged, and immortal power erupted. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the stone door shattered completely, transforming into nothing more than ash. However, before it could dissipate, it began to spin around, becoming a whirlwind of ash with the ghost eye at its center. The wind screamed around the ghost eye, seemingly on the verge of completely destroying it. After all, the wind was filled with Meng Hao's immortal power, which could even shake the peak of the immortal realm. It happened so fast that it was already over before it could even be described with words. In the blink of an eye, the windstorm surrounded the ghost eye. In turn, mysterious light began to emanate out of it, not a beam, but a halo that spread out in all directions. When the light met the windstorm was rapidly dissolved. A moment later, the ghost eye charged out, screaming as it closed in on Meng Hao. Interesting, he thought. He could sense that the life-death hex was continuing to weaken, but actually wasn't really paying attention to that. Rather than try to reinforce the power of the hex, he wanted to see exactly how strong the ghost eye was. Before the ghost eye could get very close, Meng Hao took a step forward and raised his hand. A huge wind sprang up as he clenched his hand and punched out. It seemed like a simple punch, but it actually possessed the condensed strength of all of Meng Hao's true immortal fleshly body, as well as his 123 immortal meridians. That one punch was enough to completely eradicate anyone in the immortal realm. As the punch rumbled out, the ghost eye screamed. It wanted to dodge, but was incapable of even moving. The only thing it could do was whip its tentacles up in an attempt to create a defensive barrier in front of it. At the same time, the ghost eye, which had remained open this entire time, now closed. Shocking rumbling sounds could be heard as the tentacles were destroyed as easily as shriveled weeds. The ghost eye trembled and was sent tumbling backward. Its energy immediately plummeted, and it began to grow weak and dark. As for the black imp inside, it actually grew clearer. A moment later, the ghost eye collapsed completely. However, the black-shelled imp wasn't hurt at all. It let out a piercing shriek and opened its mouth to reveal a collection of sharp teeth as it pounced toward Meng Hao. Said Meng Hao. His expression was one of excitement as he realized that the ghost eye, after having consumed so many spirit-immortal stones, and then transmogrifying, had a divine ability like this. It was actually able to resist the power of one of his punches. As the black-shelled imp approached, Meng Hao's eyes flickered. He did nothing to evade but rather allowed it to close in on him. Then when it reached him, the imp actually passed into his body, merging into him as if it were illusory. At the same time, a powerful force of possession exploded out within him. Ah, so that's what's going on, he thought, his eyes flashing coldly. He could clearly sense how the black-shelled imp inside of him was trying to destroy his soul and then take over his body, possessing him completely. The power was overbearing, seemingly impossible to stop. However, a slight smile could be seen on Meng Hao's face. Now that he knew what the black-shelled imp did, he had no desire for further testing. He snorted coldly, and a magical symbol appeared on his forehead, which was the weakened life-death hex. Suddenly, it stabilized. How could a mere black-shelled imp permanently weaken the hexing magic of the life-death hexing? As soon as the life-death hex solidified, a miserable shriek rang out. The black-shelled imp trembled as it was wrenched out from inside of Meng Hao to appear in front of him. It shook, and its miserable cries intensified until, after enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, it knelt in front of him, a pleading look on its face. As I suspected, it actually developed sentience, he murmured. He waved his hand toward the black-shelled imp. Not daring to resist, it transformed into a black beam of light that shot toward Meng Hao's palm, where it then turned into a black bean-like pod. It almost looked like a medicinal pill, and yet had no medicinal aroma. Furthermore, there appeared to be undulations of life force inside of it. Meng Hao squeezed it hard between his fingers, but no damage was done. Apparently, it was extremely resilient. It wasn't until he exerted 70% of his power that the black pod began to tremble. As cracks spread across its surface, a terrified stream of divine will suddenly shot out of it, begging for mercy. After a moment of thought, he loosened his grip, then put the black pod into his bag of holding. Finally, eyes gleaming, he looked at the other two caves with keen anticipation. Similar to the peak of the immortal realm, and also sentient. That means that there's a high likelihood that they can continue to grow. Just a single black-shelled imp is far more powerful than 10 black-shelled ghost eye beetles. And the entire reason for the transmogrification was those spirit immortal stones. If I could get more of these blackpod imps, perhaps a few dozen. Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly as he imagined a scene in which he waved his sleeve, causing massive quantities of black pods to fly out. After turning into black-shelled imps, they would possess his enemies, which would then assist him in battle. Magic pod soldiers. 1. This magic pod soldiers is actually a Chinese idiom based on a story where some magic beans turn into an army. Technically, what I'm translating as black pod or black pod could also be translated as black beans. However, I'm sorry, but that's just too goofy of a translation. I can't stand the thought of Meng Hao having black bean soldiers. If he did, I would be tempted to add a line before he used them in which he asked his opponent, "Would you like refried beans or black beans?" Besides, a pod is defined as a two-valved seed vessel, as that of the pea or bean, so I say it's close enough. In any case, if anyone wants to write a fan fiction about these guys forming a band with Lord Fifth and going on tour, I can think of lots of great band names to go along with it, he thought, eyes shining. Next, he sent his divine sense into the other two stone chambers. In one of them, the black-shelled ghost eye beetles were currently in the process of consuming each other. In the other chamber, there was only one beetle left, although it was currently sleeping. Meng Hao could sense that it wouldn't be very long before two more blackpod imps would be emerging from the stone chambers. Muttering to himself, he summoned 5 more black beetles, which he placed into the chamber with the broken door, then fed some more spirit immortal stones. Then he waved his hand, causing a glittering shield to appear that replaced the shattered door. It was about this time that the puppet boy flew down through the water and the shield, and then entered the residence. He clasped hands to Meng Hao, and then handed over a bag of holding. Meng Hao immediately looked very excited and instantly put the matter of the ghost eye beetles aside. He grabbed the bag of holding, scanned it, and then his brow furrowed. There were obviously far fewer spirit stones and immortal jade inside than had been in the bag before. Of course, it was better than nothing. It was still a hefty sum, even if it was less than before. Meng Hao waved his hand to send the puppet boy away, then sat down cross-legged and once again began to use the copper mirror to duplicate the paragon's blood. Time passed, and Meng Hao's life of sitting there duplicating with the copper mirror began once again. His eyes were bloodshot, and he continuously uttered vile curses. The copper mirror's ability to consume spirit stones, and the pain that came along with it, was something that he thought he had grown numb to. However, as it turned out, he was anything but numb. Thankfully, his supply of Paragon's blood was growing larger. About a week later, he now had 80 portions. During that time, he had sent the puppet boy out over 10 times. Each time, he came back with fewer and fewer spirit stones and immortal jade. Right now, Meng Hao was just looking up and taking a deep breath as the puppet boy returned again. Unfortunately, this time the puppet boy had no bag of holding, only a jade slip. When Meng Hao saw that it was a jade slip, he smiled bitterly. He'd already had a bad feeling about what had been happening, so he wasn't surprised when he picked up the slip, scanned it with divine sense, and heard the enraged voice of Ling Yunzi. No more. What do you do with all the spirit stones, boy? Eat them. Or do you just crush them into bits for fun? It's only been half a month. Do you have any idea how many spirit stones and immortal jade you've taken away? The Nine Seas God world has been saving up immortal jade and spirit stones for countless years, and you've already sucked away 10%. Damn it, I know I said all the resources of the sect were available to you, but the way you're clearing us out is intolerable. No more. Until we open the windswept realm, we have no more. Do you hear me? Meng Hao felt a bit awkward. Although the jade slip only contained divine sense, and Ling Yunzi hadn't come personally, Meng Hao could imagine how enraged he, as well as Granny Nine and Godmaster, must look. I don't want to waste so many spirit stones either, he grumbled. It hurts me too. He was also shocked at the wastage of spirit stones and immortal jade, and it truly did pain him inwardly. He felt a bit wronged, actually. He hadn't actually calculated how much he had spent, not because he couldn't, but because he was worried that if he knew for sure, he might pass out from the pain of it all. Besides, it was a measly 10%, that's all. The Nine Seas God world is so mighty, and yet so stingy. Clearing his throat, he continued to use divine sense to examine the message Ling Yunzi had sent. I bet you're not convinced, are you, kid? You think that 10% isn't very much. Well, let me tell you, you little whippersnapper, our faction only has access to 40% of the total cultivation resources of the Nine Seas God world. The demonic cultivator horde controls 30%, and the other two factions control 15% each. If you want more cultivation resources, well, we can't give them to you. Go challenge the Golden Door Stone Steel Trials by Fire. Win some rewards there. Because you're in the echelon, the rewards you can get will be double or more. When you win those rewards, the cost is divided out among all the factions. If you're skilled enough, then in the following 2.5 months you can clear out all the resources of the Nine Seas God world, but at least then the other factions will lose out as well, not just ours. Ling Yunzi's last words were uttered through clenched teeth. Clearly, the last half-month had been one long headache for him, Granny Nine, and Godmaster. If Meng Hao weren't in the echelon, they would most likely have long since descended upon him and slaughtered him and put an end to this no-good, spirit stone devouring black hole of a glutton. Meng Hao frowned as he retracted his divine sense from the jade slip. He looked over at the copper mirror and then at his 80 vials of Paragon's blood. I still need 20 vials. His eyes then began to shine with a frightening light and a glimmer of obsession. For the sake of completing the Paragon's blood, and for the sake of fully absorbing his nirvana fruits, Meng Hao was even beginning to think about resorting to robbery and theft. I guess I should go check out the trials by fire. With that, he clenched his jaw, rose to his feet, and walked out of the residence. As soon as he stepped outside, he heard the sound of organized, choral singing coming from the pool of water. Come, come, sing with Lord Fifth. No singing out of key now, here we go. I was a bad kid when I was young, I'm a little seafood dish. La 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 la, seafood dish. Doba doba doo, seafood dish. Chapter 1048, A Wager. As soon as Meng Hao heard the singing, he gaped. Looking over at the pool of water, he took a deep breath. His expression was one of shock as he saw 33 demonic cultivators, haggard and gaunt, singing at the top of their lungs. Their expressions were unexpectedly that of extreme passion that even bordered on worship. As they stared up at the multicolored parrot, they almost looked like cultists. As for the parrot, it was belting out the song at the top of its lungs. Most intolerable of all was that the meat jelly had transformed into a set of barrel-shaped drums, which were constantly being beaten to go along with the singing. Meng Hao simply couldn't imagine what the demonic cultivators had experienced to cause them to have such devoted gleams in their eyes. As for the singing, other than the little tune that Patriarch Reliance usually hummed, Meng Hao had never heard a more jarring melody. He was also shocked to find that when he walked out of the residence and headed toward the pool of water, the demonic cultivators, including the huge shell that hated him down to its guts, all completely ignored him and focused wholeheartedly on their song. Meng Hao felt as if the entire world were in chaos. He took a deep breath and looked at the hollering parrot, and suddenly realized that he had underestimated it. Rolling his eyes, he cleared his throat and then produced Su Yan from within his bag of holding. As soon as she opened her eyes, she chuckled coldly and was just about to deride Meng Hao when, all of a sudden, the singing caught her attention and she gaped in shock. "Parrot," said Meng Hao decisively, "I'm handing this wench over to you for training. Get her to be as obedient as all these seafood dishes. Oh right, she's worth 100 furred or feathered beasts." Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, the parrot began to tremble in midair. It even stopped singing, and all of the few colorful feathers it had left stood on end. Its eyes shone with brilliant light. 100? Did you say 100? It apparently wanted to make very sure that it had heard correctly. Meng Hao nodded somberly. 100, each and every one with luxuriant coats of fur or feathers. In order to get his hands on that Taoist magic, he was willing to throw caution to the wind. Su Yan gaped in astonishment. She wasn't quite sure exactly what Meng Hao and the colorful bird were talking about. However, she quickly began to chuckle coldly, and her expression was one of extreme derision. The parrot, however, was very excited, and instantly threw its head back and roared. "Don't worry, Lord Fifth will get this wench in line." It looked excitedly toward Su Yan, eyes shining. Off to the side, the meat jelly didn't seem to be very pleased at having been left out. "Can you sing well, can you?" it asked angrily. "Can you count?" "Morons," Su Yan said with a laugh, closing her eyes and ignoring them. Meng Hao gave Su Yan a pitying look, then cleared his throat. Not bothering to consider how the parrot would be training Su Yan, he turned and flew up into the air. In the blink of an eye, he shot through the shield and the pool of water, appearing suddenly in midair. Almost as soon as he emerged, he saw two beams of light flying through the air in his general direction. Within those beams of light, two cold gazes could be seen. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he watched two demonic cultivators flying by. They snorted coldly, doing nothing to disguise their contempt for him as they flew past and then headed off into the distance. Meng Hao didn't mind. The main reason he was emerging from his immortal's cave was for immortal jade and spirit stones. Without further hesitation, he flew into the air toward the Golden Gate stone steels. He did not intend to blindly challenge the steels. Instead, he would go learn something about them, then decide later which one to challenge first. I need to find the one most suited to me. That way, I'll be able to get the rewards I need in the shortest time possible. As for his work with the Paragon's blood, he was determined to succeed. On the way to the Golden Gate stone steels, he passed various disciples. The regular cultivators looked at him curiously. Some even smiled and clasped hands. After all, Meng Hao was famous even outside the sect, and earlier he had talked down a Tao realm expert. That news had caused quite a sensation in the Nine Seas God world. However, the demonic cultivators he encountered all bristled with killing intent. The hatred in their eyes was clear, and when they saw Meng Hao, it only continued to grow deeper. Eventually, he came to stand in front of a towering Golden Gate stone steel. It shone with boundless golden light and was carved with so many names that they seemed impossible to count. Quite a few cultivators and demonic cultivators were gathered in the area. Anytime someone touched the gate, they would disappear. People would disappear and people would reappear. It was quite a lively scene. A middle-aged man sat cross-legged at the base of the stone gate. His eyes were closed, as if he didn't care about what was happening in the world outside at all. However, if anyone attempted to start a fight in the area, or if people attempting the trial by fire tried to cheat in any way, he would instantly know, and punishment would be meted out without hesitation. Meng Hao stood off to the side, watching the scene for a while. He was just about to leave when, all of a sudden, a glittering bright red light began to spread out from one of the stone steels. The light rapidly transformed to the image of an illusory world up in midair. Within that world, a young woman could be seen, who was the source of the light. She was beautiful, but shockingly, a white-robed female corpse could be seen floating behind her, making her even more astonishing. Cries of envy and shock could instantly be heard from all directions. The nameless changed. Elder Sister Fan Donger got into the top 30. The top 100 are all ancient realm cultivators, although you can only make it into the rankings if you have 5 or less extinguished soul lamps. But Elder Sister Fan Donger got into the top 30 while only in the immortal realm. She's definitely a true chosen. Cries of shock rang out among the cultivators in the area, including the demonic cultivators. Many people looked envious, whereas others had dark looks or even seemed unwilling to accept what had happened. At the same time, Fan Donger's name appeared as the 30th name on the list. The red light shone for a bit longer, then faded away. As it disappeared, Fan Donger strode out from the stone stele. Her face was a bit pale, but she looked excited. As soon as she appeared, the surrounding disciples began to clasp hands and call out in congratulations. Fan Donger smiled and clasped hands in return. She was just about to leave, when suddenly, her phoenix-like eyes flashed as she caught sight of Meng Hao. Meng Hao smiled and nodded, then turned to leave. He now knew that this stone steel trial by fire was about divine sense. Although Meng Hao was confident regarding his own divine sense, it wasn't his strongest area. Furthermore, in previous encounters with Fan Donger, he could tell that the reason why her divine abilities and Taoist magics were so powerful was not because of her cultivation base, but rather her divine sense. Perhaps it has something to do with the techniques of the Nine Seas God world. I really should take some time to go to their scripture pavilion. After another moment of thought, he prepared to make his way off when all of a sudden, he heard the sound of air being shattered behind him. He turned to find Fan Donger chasing him down. As for Fan Donger, she was muttering inwardly to herself that if it wasn't for the fact that her master had instructed her to help Meng Hao familiarize himself with the Golden Gate stone steels, she wouldn't have even approached him. Thinking about her battle with him after he reached immortal ascension caused her heart to fill with hatred. Back when he had first arrived and gotten into conflict with the demonic cultivators, she had felt quite pleased and had looked forward to the scene of the demonic cultivators tearing him to pieces. "Congratulations on reaching the top 30, junior sister," Meng Hao said with a laugh. "That's elder sister to you," she replied. Every time she looked at Meng Hao, she felt uncontrollable fury rising up within her. It was almost as if the mere sight of his face would put her emotions completely out of control. "There's only one elder sister in my life," Meng Hao responded coolly. When Fan Donger heard this, she gaped in surprise. Instead of pressing the issue, she took a deep breath, calmed herself, and then began to speak again, her face expressionless. "The Golden Gate stone steels of the Nine Seas God world number 9 in total. The first is the most important, which is a test regarding the pressure of the Ninth Sea. It is one of the most important trials by fire in the Nine Seas God world. The other 8 gates test different aspects of cultivation. For example, the 9th stone steel is a fleshly body trial by fire. This, the 7th, has to do with divine sense. Then there's the 5th stone steel, which is a trial by fire of slaughter. By experiencing a true battlefield, one can achieve the Tao of slaughtering. The 3rd stone steel probably won't suit you. It is regarding the Tao of transformation. Each person who enters into the top 100 on a Golden Gate stone steel receives a reward based on what rank they achieve. Greater rewards come as you go from the top 100 to the top 50 and the top 30. Fan Donger rushed through the information, as if she was planning to leave right afterwards. She was worried that if she talked to Meng Hao for too long, she wouldn't be able to control herself and would begin another all-out battle with him. "What about the top 10? He asked. "Top 10? I suggest you don't think that far ahead," she replied, doing nothing to hide the derision in her tone. "Don't even dream of getting that high. Up to now in the Nine Seas God world, no one with an immortal realm cultivation base has ever gotten into the top 10. At the very least, you need to be in the ancient realm with 2 extinguished soul lamps to even compete over the top 10. As for you, you would be lucky to get into the top 20. You might be the immortal realm paragon, but there are a lot of cultivators in the Nine Seas God world that you couldn't lift a finger to." As Meng Hao looked at Fan Donger, his expression turned somewhat bashful, as if he felt a bit embarrassed about what he was going to say. "You hit the nail on the head," he said. "My goal is the top 10. Do you dare to make a bet with me about it?" Almost as soon as Fan Donger saw the bashful expression on his face, she felt like her scalp was about to explode. She instantly backed up, rotating her cultivation base and going on full guard, eyeing Meng Hao with extreme vigilance. That expression was one which caused her heart to prickle, and it wasn't the first time she had seen it. She knew that whenever such an expression appeared, Meng Hao would be at his most wicked. Not for the first time, Fan Donger dearly wished she could bash his face in so hard that she never had to see it again. "Well, do you dare?" he repeated, looking at her and blinking. "There's no reason to try to convince me," she replied with a cold harumph. "It doesn't matter what tricks you use. I simply can't believe that you could get into the top 10 of any of the Golden Gate stone steels." Furthermore, if you think there's any way I'll be making a wager with you, you can keep on dreaming." Giving him one final derisive and scornful look, she turned to leave. "If you win, I'll take Inky back," he said casually. Those words caused Fan Donger to instantly stop in place. She shuddered, then turned back, her face a mass of murderous rage. She glared at Meng Hao, panting, chest heaving. She was fundamentally beautiful, but when she had a look like this in her eyes, she was even more attractive. That corpse was something Fan Donger had gotten used to. She had viewed it as a way to temper her Dao heart. However, deep down, she would do anything in the hopes of getting rid of it. Not even her master could dispel the corpse, and so, her tempering had been because she had no other choice. Therefore, how could she possibly keep her calm when Meng Hao said something like he just had? Furthermore, how could she be sure he could even do what he said? Well aware of what Fan Donger must be thinking, Meng Hao smiled and said, "I can, because I was the one who stuck you with her." "You," Fan Donger gritted her teeth. "Fine, let's gamble." Chapter 1049, The Ninth Golden Door. As soon as the words left Fan Donger's mouth, Meng Hao cleared his throat. For some reason, it didn't feel right to con her in this way. But then he thought about the situation with the Paragon's blood, and the vast amount of spirit stones and immortal jade he needed, and he realized that he couldn't let even the smallest juicy prey escape his grasp. "How many spirit stones do you want to bet?" he asked her. Fan Donger snorted coldly. How could she not tell that Meng Hao was confident in his abilities? Otherwise, he would never have mentioned the possibility of a bet. However, she was equally confident in being able to win, and in fact was certain that she would. Meng Hao had never been to the Nine Seas God world, let alone entered the Golden Gate stone steels. However, she was very familiar with them, far more so than Meng Hao. "All right, Meng Hao, let's see who cons who this time," she thought. Her expression cold, she pretended as if she were throwing all caution to the wind. However, inwardly she was actually feeling quite complacent. This time, it was Meng Hao who had lured her into a bet. It was she who was pulling the strings. At the same time that Meng Hao was scheming about her, she was scheming about him. "In the interest of time, I'm only willing to bet on the first time you enter one of the Golden Gate stone steel trials by fire," she said. "If you tried them all, who knows how long it would take for you to finish. So only your first try counts. You can select any one of the steels, and if you can get into the top 10, then I'll give you 100,000 immortal jades and 5 million spirit stones. Those are the stakes. Furthermore, you must make your first attempt at the trial by fire today. I don't have time to sit around waiting for you. If you get into the top 10, you can take everything immediately. If you can't, then you must swear an oath upon the Tao that not only will you take this corpse away, you'll also cancel my promissory note. Plus, every time you meet me, you have to get on your knees and kowtow in greeting." The way Fan Donger gritted her teeth and glared at Meng Hao made it seem like the reason she had added more stipulations was because she regretted her sudden impulsiveness and was hoping Meng Hao would back out. Meng Hao blinked and looked suspiciously at Fan Donger. Then, he slowly nodded his head. "All right, fine," he said. "We're old friends, so even though the bet is a bit unfair to me, I'll accept it, all because of our relationship. Let's do it." Fan Donger couldn't conceal the bright glow in her eyes as she immediately responded. "The agreement is reached." "And the Tao bears witness," replied Meng Hao without hesitation. Quite a few surrounding disciples overheard what was going on and were watching closely. That was especially true of some of the male cultivators, who looked at Meng Hao with open hostility. Apparently, they felt that any enemy of Fan Donger was their enemy too. When Fan Donger heard Meng Hao's response, she immediately smiled. Now, she no longer made any attempts to cover up her scheming, or the fact that she had been baiting Meng Hao. She was 80% certain that Meng Hao was going to lose. When Meng Hao saw Fan Donger's expression, he smiled. Considering his years of experience as a con artist, how could he possibly have failed to notice that Fan Donger was leading him along? He didn't immediately select a stone steel to begin a trial by fire. Instead, he transformed into a beam of light that shot back and forth between the other 8 Golden Gate stone steels as he examined them. Fan Donger followed along, as did other disciples of the Nine Seas God world, including quite a few demonic cultivators. Many of those people sent messages to friends, and soon, word spread about the bet between Meng Hao and Fan Donger. Fan Donger was the divine daughter of this generation of the Nine Seas God world, and was even famous in the outside world. There wasn't anybody in the Nine Seas God world who didn't know who she was. Couple that with the fact that she was spectacularly beautiful, and it would be impossible to say conclusively how many of her fellow disciples completely adored her. Naturally, the fact that she had a wager going with someone quickly drew a lot of attention. Of course, Meng Hao was also famous in the outside world. In fact, his name was far more illustrious than Fan Donger's. Be it in terms of his identity or his accomplishments, he was the center of much attention. Furthermore, only half a month ago, he had stood up to and even berated a Dao realm expert. Word of that had spread throughout the entire Nine Seas God world, which made the matter of his wager with Fan Donger that much more intriguing. Demonic cultivators came. Ordinary cultivators came. It didn't take long before there were fully 10,000 cultivators following Meng Hao around and discussing what was happening. Most of them looked at him with curiosity. However, as would be expected, most of them were inclined to support Fan Donger. Around noontime, Meng Hao finished his inspection of the 9 Golden Gate stone steels, whereupon he hovered in midair, muttering to himself. "What's wrong? Can't decide which one to pick," asked Fan Donger, sneering coldly. "Don't try to delay things, Meng Hao. We already made the bet. You can only do the trial by fire today." Meng Hao turned to look at her, then smiled. His eyes flickered with a cold gleam as, without another word, he shot away like lightning. Rumbling filled the air as he headed directly toward the 9th Golden Gate stone steel. The first stone steel was a test regarding the pressure of the 9th sea, something he wasn't ready for. After a bit of examination of the other trials by fire, he didn't feel extremely confident in his ability to win the bet in any of them. However, the 9th stone steel was a trial by fire of the fleshly body. In that, he had faith. Fan Donger's eyes flickered, and inwardly she was laughing coldly. The 9th stone steel was actually one of 3 that she had speculated he would select. Therefore, it was no surprise to her at all that he chose that one. "You're definitely going to lose," she thought, setting her jaw arrogantly. The surrounding disciples immediately began to discuss the matter. The 9th stone steel. This Meng Hao has a true immortal fleshly body, so selecting this stone steel is actually a pretty conservative choice. However, he's also being a bit rash, wouldn't you say? The 9th stone steel is very hard. Him losing would be a good thing. Deflate him a bit. After all, this is the 9 Seas God world. Apparently, none of the disciples believed that Meng Hao would succeed. Heaven and earth rumbled as Meng Hao shot toward the 9th Golden Gate stone steel, a beam of prismatic light that split the air. As he neared, it was evident that there were already a large number of disciples gathered there, clearly aware of the wager between Fan Donger and Meng Hao. Their eyes glittered as they watched Meng Hao unhesitatingly speed directly toward the huge stone steel. As soon as he touched it, he vanished inside. Subsequently, the more than 10,000 disciples outside of the stone steel all fixed their eyes on the list of names as they waited for any change. Fan Donger chuckled coldly. She was very calm and completely confident that Meng Hao would be defeated. Inside of the Golden Gate stone steel was an entire world which stretched out in all directions. However, there was no sky or land, just blankness. Meng Hao frowned as he realized that his immortal meridians were apparently sealed. He could not rotate them in the slightest, making it impossible to utilize any divine abilities or magical techniques. "My magic has been sealed off," he thought. He sent some divine sense into his bag of holding and found that even it was affected. Nearly all of the items inside were impossible to use. Apparently, the natural laws in this place restricted anything related to magic. There were a few heaven-defying items within his bag of holding that were still available for use. Most shocking of all was that the black pod was still emanating ripples. Apparently, it was unaffected by the sealing and could still be used. Even as shock washed through Meng Hao, popping sounds suddenly rang out from up ahead. Next, a tall figure strode out from within the void. It was a man wearing a mask, with a long head of flowing white hair and a navy blue robe. Not a single cultivation base ripple emanated off of him as he approached, causing Meng Hao's eyes to widen. He could sense that the man had a boundless power of qi and blood within him. Although he had absolutely no cultivation base fluctuations, his qi and blood power was towering. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he realized what type of cultivation this man practiced. A body cultivator. Back when he was doing research in the Fang clan's ancient records, he saw information about a common type of cultivation from ancient times. Those cultivators did not cultivate special types of magic, but rather focused on their fleshly bodies. People like that were referred to as body cultivators. The most unique thing about them was that their bodies did not contain the least bit of spiritual energy. However, their qi and blood could influence the workings of the world around them. The man in front of him hadn't reached that level yet. However, his qi and blood were still extremely vigorous, shocking to the extreme. As soon as he appeared, he didn't hesitate for even a moment. He strode forward, and before he was even close, his boundless qi and blood surged, transforming into an incredible pressure that crushed down on Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and he couldn't help but smile. So I can't use any magical techniques. I can only rely on my fleshly body. Well, in that case, it's time to see exactly how far my true immortal fleshly body can take me. He took a deep breath, and without any further hesitation began to stride toward the man. As they closed in on each other, both of them clenched their hands into fists and punched out. A boom rattled out. Meng Hao went all out with his fleshly body, giving rise to a gale-force wind. When his blow landed on his opponent, a massive shockwave spread out in all directions. Meng Hao's hair was thrown into disarray, and yet he didn't retreat even half a pace. The initial punch actually got him excited. It felt quite relaxing to be able to unleash such power. As for his opponent, the man trembled and fell back a few paces. "Time to die," Meng Hao roared, stepping forward and punching again. The punch landed on nothing, but it caused the void to collapse, kicking up a huge wind that slammed into his opponent. The man's body shook, and in the blink of an eye, he was completely shattered into bits by the force of the strike. However, in that same moment, two more men appeared within the void. They looked identical to the first man, with navy blue robes and masks. Their qi and blood were also incredibly powerful, and they immediately charged toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao threw his head back and laughed. He didn't back up but instead went on the offensive. Booms filled the air as the two figures were destroyed. A moment later, four figures appeared, with even stronger qi and blood. This happened over and over again. Meng Hao attacked repeatedly, and a massive energy built up in his body. It was a domineering air, a courageous madness. Rumbling could be heard as the entire world was shaken. 4 opponents destroyed. Then there were 8. After 8 were destroyed, there were 16. After 16 were destroyed, 32 appeared. After that, there were 64, 128, 256. Each and every time, their qi and blood were even stronger. Vast crowds surrounded Meng Hao, who only continued to laugh. He almost never came across a chance like this, in which magical techniques weren't important and he could rely only on his fleshly body. Every time he launched a punch, wild colors flashed about. Furthermore, his name began to rise on the Stone Steel's list. Chapter 1050, Celestial Warrior. Actually, Meng Hao's name had appeared on the Stone Steel in the instant he had slaughtered 64 enemies. Prominently displayed on the Golden Gate Stone Steel was a list of 1,000 names. However, while the names of the top 100 shone with brilliant light, the names of those outside of the top 100 were darkened to the point where you couldn't read them clearly without using divine sense. As for Meng Hao's name, when it appeared, it was in the 997th position. On any other occasion, few people would have taken note of this. Most people only paid attention to the top 100. The 900 names below that might have their own bit of glory, but not enough to cause any sort of stir. As of this moment, however, the 10,000 spectators who were staring at the Stone Steel immediately caught sight of Meng Hao's name and began to cry out. "There it is. He's in 997th place. That was so fast. How long has he been in there?" Immediately, various disciples began to analyze the situation, and soon they determined that from the time Meng Hao disappeared into the Golden Gate Stone Steel until the time his name appeared, less time had passed than it would take an incense stick to burn. In fact, in the brief time in which they discussed the matter, his name leapt from the 997th spot to the 831st, and it didn't stop there. It leapt again, from the 831st spot to the 498th. A huge commotion rose up, and everyone was clearly shocked. Everyone was staring at the Stone Steel, astonished at the progress Meng Hao was making. Based on his reputation, everyone was sure that he would reach the top 100, but what was causing such widespread shock was the speed with which he was moving up in the ranks. He was rising so quickly that everyone was mentally shaken. When fighting 100 people, defeating them in 100 breaths of time was a completely different matter than defeating them in 50 breaths of time. Furthermore, to be able to do so in only 10 breaths of time was like the difference between heaven and earth. That was how all of the disciples of the Nine Seas God world currently felt about Meng Hao. Although they could see no images of what was taking place inside the trial by fire, when they calculated how quickly he was moving up, they knew that he was bursting with momentum and energy. Fan Donger's expression flickered, but quickly returned to normal. The real difficulty lies in the top 100, she murmured to herself, clenching her jaw. He might be moving quickly in the early stages, but so what? Back in the Golden Gate Stone Steel, Meng Hao was laughing out loud. His chi and blood surged like that of an explosive dragon. He advanced courageously, dispatching the blue-robed figures with constant attacks. They were like dried weeds in front of him. After dispatching the 256 cultivators with boundless chi and blood power, Meng Hao's eyes glowed with obsession. He was panting a bit, but his heart was filled with the desire to do battle. I'm definitely going to get into the top 10. Even if it technically shouldn't be possible for me, I can still do it. He looked down at his bag of holding. Located inside was another item, which was the key to his confidence in being able to win the bet with Fan Donger. This might be a trial by fire, and most of the items in his bag of holding were sealed. However, as Meng Hao had expected, the item that he was counting on could not be sealed. As far as the black pod, the fact that it was also unsealed had been completely unexpected. Even as he stood there, panting slightly, the void up ahead rippled. Meng Hao was given no rest as a massive aura exploded out in front of him. Shockingly, 512 men in navy blue robes stepped out. Each one was far more powerful than any of the previous enemies he had fought. Their chi and blood power placed them in a position similar to the peak of the immortal realm. However, these were not like Chosen with 90 or more meridians, but rather more like peak immortals with 70 meridians or so. Even still, they were incredibly powerful. Meng Hao wasn't sure how members of the Nine Seas God world normally pass challenges such as this. Perhaps they had a special body tempering technique. In any case, his eyes glittered as he stepped forward and went on the attack again. Rumbling shook everything as he launched his punch. Massive vibrations could be sensed as he lost track of time, and even forgot that he was in a trial by fire. He focused completely on using his fleshly body to attack and destroy. This was the first time he had not relied on any magical techniques or divine abilities, nor on his cultivation base. This was a battle fought only with the fleshly body. His entire body was trembling, not because of muscle fatigue, but rather because it was finally able to utilize the full potential of its power. In fact, Meng Hao could sense that, because of the constant fighting within the trial by fire, his fleshly body was now showing signs of a breakthrough, and was becoming even more powerful. He roared as he shot forward, letting out a powerful punch that instantly exterminated 3 opponents. By the time he finished with the 512th opponent, blood was oozing out of his mouth and he was breathing heavily. Then he looked up and saw, not 1,024 opponents, but rather, a single person. He wore a long crimson robe, and as he walked forward, the void around him turned bright red. That red color was not visible to the naked eye. It could only be seen with divine sense. It was something that came only after reaching a certain level of chi and blood power, something that actually influenced the natural law around it. As soon as Meng Hao saw this crimson-robed figure, his eyes widened, and he could sense the threatening air exuded by the man. So a true body cultivator has finally appeared, he thought, eyes shining with the desire to fight. From the chi and blood power emanating off of the man, Meng Hao was able to tell that he was definitely a match for the peak of the true immortal realm. Meanwhile, everyone in the outside world was in an uproar. The more than 10,000 spectators outside of the 9th Golden Gate Stone Steel watched as Meng Hao's name rose up on the list. It went from the 400s up into the 300s, all the way until it reached the 101st position. As for how much time had passed since Meng Hao had started, it was only a single hour. To cultivators, a single hour was like nothing. And yet, that was how much time Meng Hao had used to climb all the way to the 101st position. This Meng Hao, just how powerful is his fleshly body? An hour, it's only been 1 hour. I suddenly have the feeling that he might actually make it into the top 10. Not necessarily. Maybe he used some type of secret technique to bolster his fleshly body for a temporary boost in power. As the conversations went on, Fan Donger's face was extremely unsightly. Although she didn't want to admit it, she was actually getting quite nervous. For Meng Hao to get to the 101st position in only 1 hour was something extremely rare in the Golden Gate Stone Steel trials by fire. Back inside, Meng Hao had no idea where his name was on the list, nor did he care. Because of that item inside his bag of holding, he was confident that he wouldn't lose. Compared to what was at stake depending on whether he won or lost, the gains he was making in terms of his fleshly body were far more important. Up ahead, the crimson-robed man stepped forward toward Meng Hao. He only took 3 steps, but each step caused shocking rumbling like thunder to shake everything. Meng Hao's heart quivered as though it were being stepped on. He felt stifled, as if, when standing in front of this crimson-robed man, he couldn't help but feel regret. But then his eyes flickered with the desire to fight, and his chi and blood surged, instantly rising up to fight back against the feeling. He did not retreat, he advanced, directly toward the crimson-robed man. The man looked up, and his eyes shone with a glow like that of blood. As Meng Hao closed in on him, he also charged. The two did not speak, nor did they use magic. They simply fought. Booms rang out, shaking heaven and earth. Meng Hao launched punch after punch, as did the crimson-robed man. They went back and forth in midair, occasionally throwing sweeping kicks into the brawl. In a brief moment, they had exchanged hundreds of blows. Meng Hao was laughing loudly. The more he fought, the stronger he seemed to become. It was as if his true immortal fleshly body was undergoing tempering. It was exploding past his previous level of battle prowess, leading Meng Hao to the conclusion that he had overlooked the fact that his fleshly body could only grow stronger when he used it to fight. That was the key to growing more powerful. Fight. Meng Hao's desire to do battle surged. He attacked relentlessly, advanced without pause. The crimson-robed man seethed with chi and blood power, but was forced backward over and over again. It didn't matter that he was a body cultivator who had reached the point of being able to affect natural law. He was simply no match for Meng Hao's true, immortal fleshly body. About a dozen breaths of time passed. Meng Hao roared, and then let out a punch that completely destroyed the crimson-robed man. The world went quiet and peaceful, and Meng Hao hovered in midair, his chi and blood surging, growing more powerful. Shockingly, a red glow began to spread out around him. Apparently, he was able to influence this world's natural law. As of this moment, Meng Hao looked exactly like a celestial warrior. I understand. Body cultivators need repeated bloody battles to progress. His eyes shone with enlightenment. In any other situation outside, he could rely on magical techniques to kill the crimson-robed opponent as easily as turning over his hand. But he had no such access to magical techniques now, forcing him to temper his fleshly body. He was causing his true, immortal fleshly body to burst out with the true power that it was capable of. Almost in the same moment that the crimson-robed opponent vanished, Meng Hao's name once again climbed up on the list. He didn't know that, though. What he saw was the void up ahead of him rippling as 2 crimson-robed men emerged. It was like a cycle, with 512 as the limit. Every cycle had different body cultivators, wearing different clothing from different realms of body cultivation. 4816, 3264. There was no rest in this trial by fire. His fleshly body grew stronger, his insane desire for battle growing ever more frenzied. He coughed up blood, but it made him more powerful. Underneath the constant onslaught, his fleshly body gradually approached the point of perfection. It was at the point when 256 crimson-robed opponents appeared that Meng Hao finally began to fall back. There were simply too many people, all of them body cultivators, who could influence natural law. Meng Hao's fleshly body power was now reaching its limit. His eyes flickered as they surrounded him, and he gave a cold harumph. He was not averse to using cheating methods. However, he didn't want to use his final trump card so easily. Therefore, he tossed out the black pod. The imp appeared, screeching as it shot toward the incoming crimson-robed opponents. A group of crimson-robed men immediately split off to deal with the black-pod imp. The imp was ferocious and didn't attempt to dodge. Instead, it used its carapace to defend itself. Although it wasn't really a match for these crimson-robed men, the more it fought, the more confident it got. When it was injured, the injuries healed. Whenever any of the opponents got near, it would attempt to possess them. However, it quickly became apparent that the crimson-robed men did not actually have the types of bodies that could be possessed. Therefore, the imp simply slashed them to pieces and consumed their flesh and blood. In the end, the imp was able to take care of a dozen or so crimson-robed opponents, taking a bit of the pressure off of Meng Hao. Meng Hao was actually shocked at this outcome, and split his attention between fighting the crimson-robed men and observing the little black-pod imp. Time went by, and after a few dozen breaths of time, the black-pod imp was struck by one of the crimson-robed body cultivators and was sent flying. As it flew through midair, it spit out a mouthful of blood and then let out an ear-piercing screech. Dagger. As soon as it let out the cry, its body distorted, and it transformed into a dagger which shot toward the crimson-robed opponent. Expand. Meanwhile, back in Meng Hao's Immortal's cave, rumbling sounds could be heard coming from within 2 of the stone chambers in his residence. It didn't take long for the two chambers to completely collapse. Two ghost eyes suddenly emerged from within the cloud of dust. When they saw each other, sparks of hostility could be seen, but instead of fighting each other, they flew out of the residence, apparently intent on making their escape. However, as soon as they emerged, they found themselves facing the parrot, who was in the middle of coaching the demonic cultivators in their singing. The parrot stared in shock, and then immediately looked displeased. They look so familiar, but I can't quite place them. Anyway, why is their fur so sparse? You fool, they don't have fur, those are tentacles. Off to the side, the meat jelly jumped at the chance to correct the parrot. All of a sudden it felt as if it knew about everything in the world, which also caused it to feel superior to and wiser than the parrot. Well, it doesn't matter if it's fur or tentacles, the parrot responded angrily. They just don't have enough. Come, come, you two, time to practice some singing with Lord Fifth. It flew toward the two ghost eyes without any hesitation. The two ghost eyes emanated mysterious glows, and without hesitation charged the parrot in attack. Shockingly, the two imps inside of the eyes opened their mouths wide, as if to possess the parrot. They all slammed into each other, and surprisingly, the parrot wasn't hurt at all. In contrast, the two imps let out miserable shrieks. They had sensed some sort of terrifying aura within the parrot and began to flee. The ghost eyes faded away, revealing the imps, which transformed into black pods as they shot backward. The parrot looked very proud of itself and was just about to start speaking when the two black pods suddenly shrieked, "Dagger!" It was a shrill sound, tinged with madness. Next, two black daggers shot toward the parrot. The parrot gaped in shock. Black pods that become daggers, pod daggers, they seemed so familiar. Meanwhile, back in the ninth Golden Gate stone steel, the black pod in dagger form stabbed into a crimson-robed body cultivator, causing him to instantly vanish. Unexpectedly, he was completely absorbed, consumed by the dagger. Meng Hao's eyes flashed, and he kept fighting. Not much more time passed before he was able to wipe out the remaining 200 or so enemies. Then, the void up ahead rippled once again. 512 body cultivators appeared. A new round of slaughter had begun. Considering how many people he was fighting now, it was impossible for Meng Hao to maintain his previous momentum. He began to edge backward, and yet his expression was calm. Despite being forced backward, he occasionally looked over at the Blackpot imp, who was battling with increasing courage. As it continued to absorb the body cultivators, it was beginning to emanate a sensation of qi and blood that caused Meng Hao's awe of the imp to increase. Outside, the more than 10,000 disciples stared in shock as Meng Hao's name rose from 101st place to 97th, 85th, 78th, 63rd, 54th. Finally, Meng Hao's name appeared in the 46th position. The golden light which shone from the name made it clear to everyone. Furthermore, in terms of time, Meng Hao reached that position only 2 hours after beginning the stone steel trial by fire. Everyone was completely shaken by this. Furthermore, the glittering golden light which rose up attracted the attention of disciples in other areas of the Nine Seas God world. They came over and began to ask about what was happening, and were shocked when they found out. The demonic cultivators were more affected than the ordinary cultivators. They stood there with grim faces and swirling killing intent. As for Fandonger, her face was extremely unsightly, and her hands were balled into fists. Considering the power of his fleshly body, he shouldn't have any problems making it into the top 30, she thought, gritting her teeth. But why is he going so fast? Meng Hao had long since passed up her own name on the list, which was not unexpected. However, according to her calculations, Meng Hao should have taken a whole day to get to his current position. Instead, he used only 2 hours. By now, many of the ancient realm experts had sensed what was happening in the ninth Golden Gate stone steel, and were sending divine sense over to investigate. Inside the stone steel, Meng Hao looked around at the hundreds of crimson-robed cultivators who surrounded him, and sighed. Even with the assistance of the Blackpot imp, it was not an easy thing to go up against the combined qi and blood might of these body cultivators. I wonder how high up I am on the list, he thought. Definitely not first. How did all the other people from the Nine Seas God world get so high in the rankings? How did they cultivate fleshly bodies more powerful than mine? Meng Hao's eyes glittered. Perhaps it has something to do with body cultivation itself, or perhaps the Nine Seas God world has true body cultivators. He hadn't been in the Nine Seas God world for very long, but even in that short time, he had made incredible gains. Not only had his fleshly body grown stronger, but he now had some clues about the path of body cultivation. Were it not for that, he would have long since already reached his limit. Now, however, he felt that his power was just a bit lacking. Although I haven't reached the point of needing to use that item still, my fleshly body power just isn't sufficient. He took a step back, eyes glittering. In that case, he said, taking a deep breath, let's see what types of body cultivators are here in this fleshly body trial by fire. Although his immortal meridians were sealed, and he couldn't unleash magical techniques, he had sensed earlier that the secret magic of his immortal meridians was still accessible. His fleshly body was modeled after a single one of his 123 immortal meridians. Therefore, he should be able to transform all of his 123 immortal meridians into fleshly body power. He truly wanted to know exactly how powerful he would become if he transformed his fleshly body that way using the secret magic. He closed his eyes and the crimson-robed body cultivators closed in on him. When they were almost upon in, his eyes snapped open, and rumbling sounds filled his body. It was like a giant beating on a drum, intense booms that shook the entire world. Inside his body, 123 immortal meridians, despite being sealed and incapable of unleashing magical techniques, were not prevented from transforming into fleshly body power. Rumbling sounds could be heard as Meng Hao's power exploded upward. Qi and blood power surged, and massive energy rose up. Are you MMMBLLLE? The incoming crimson-robed body cultivators were instantly smashed to bits by the surging energy. They became nothing more than ash that swirled around Meng Hao. The blackpot imp let out a shriek and immediately evaded, looking back at Meng Hao with intense fear in its eyes. All of the red-robed body cultivators were instantly destroyed. Meng Hao clenched his fists and looked up, and his eyes shone with a bright light. Outside, his name instantly shot up from the 40s into the 19th position. From ancient times until now, only 18 people had ever performed better than Meng Hao, and they were all ancient realm cultivators with at least 5 extinguished soul lamps. Furthermore, their fleshly bodies were not necessarily more powerful than Meng Hao's. After all, he had cleared the entire stage in only a few breaths of time, whereas many of the others had been forced to slowly kill all of their opponents. The result was the same, but the process was vastly different. The outside world was in an unprecedented level of uproar. The disciples of the Nine Seas God world couldn't believe their eyes when they saw his name leap from the 40s all the way to the top 20. Meng Hao. Fan Donger's eyes were wide, and she was panting with disbelief and shock. She even gasped. The top 20. Meng Hao got into the top 20, only 4 hours to reach the top 20. It's hard to say whether or not he might actually get into the top 10. Boundless golden light rose up from the stone steel, catching even more attention. More disciples were arriving in beams of brilliant light. Meanwhile, back in the world of the stone steel, Meng Hao hovered there, looking every bit like a celestial warrior. His energy was impossible to describe. He was a celestial warrior, the immortal realm paragon, and now his fleshly body had also reached the level of the immortal realm paragon. The blackpot imp was trembling as the void distorted up ahead. Soon, rumbling sounds could be heard as distortions could be seen, from within which emerged a black-robed man. It was only a single person, wearing a black robe and a mask. However, when he appeared, his explosive qi and blood power caused cracks to appear everywhere. A terrifying energy rose up from him, which was the power of the peak of the immortal realm, a level of power equivalent to Meng Hao's before he had used the immortal meridian secret technique. However, compared to Meng Hao's present state, this man's energy was far too weak. Meng Hao advanced, extending his hand. He didn't use a fist but rather just waved his arm, causing fleshly body power to shake the natural law in the area. A huge concave depression appeared, which immediately overwhelmed the black-robed man. "Break," he said softly. A boom could be heard as the black-robed man shattered. Next, 2 men appeared, then 4, 8, all the way until 512 black-robed figures could be seen. Each and every one of them were crushed by Meng Hao. His face was one of determination, and he attacked with lightning speed. The power of his fleshly body had already reached the pinnacle of the current generation, and even exceeded that of ancient realm experts. However, Meng Hao knew that this was not his most powerful state. An even more powerful state would be one in which he could successfully absorb the 4 nirvana fruits. At that time, before he entered the ancient realm, he would have the most powerful fleshly body state to ever exist in the immortal realm from ancient times until now. That would be something that might even exceed the immortal emperor realm. 512 black-robed men were smashed, causing Meng Hao's name to jump from 19th place on the stone stele to 5th. Outside, the crowd went wild. 5th, Meng Hao got 5th place. The only people ahead of him are the legendary 4 celestial warriors. From ancient times until now, from the beginning of the 9th Sea and the 9 Seas God world, the top 4 of the 9th Golden Gate stone stele have never been surpassed. Those 4 names have always been there. Those 4 people aren't like chosen from our era. They have been in that same spot for ages. Their record has never been broken by anyone. Chapter 1051, Top 10. /expand. Van Donger staggered back, her face ashen. He's cheating. He must be cheating, she thought, her eyes completely bloodshot. In this particular instance, however, her accusation was completely unfounded. While it was true that Meng Hao tended to cheat and was even prepared to do so, at the moment he really was. His continuous fighting led to continuous advancement. As a result, his current fleshly body state was becoming increasingly powerful. He hovered in the world of the Golden Gate stone stele, looking at the figures in front of him as they faded away. Then the void up ahead distorted, and a white-robed old man materialized. The old man wore no mask, and he was alone. He seemed almost like the center of the entire world, and yet no chi and blood power radiated off of him. It was almost as if he were immortal. However, he gave Meng Hao an incredibly enigmatic feeling. Deep down, Meng Hao also sensed an indescribable feeling of crisis that left him utterly shaken. The old man looked at Meng Hao for a moment, and then suddenly spoke, his voice ancient and archaic. "I am the final stage of this trial by fire," he said coolly. "Throughout history, there have only been 4 people under the Tao realm who have been able to handle my first fist strike. Of those, 2 were able to withstand a second. Only 1 could handle 3 strikes. Anyone who can defeat me will find their reward from the Golden Gate stone stele increased tenfold. Unfortunately, no one under the Tao realm has ever done that." As he spoke, he began to shine with a brilliant, golden light, as if his whole body had turned metallic. Meng Hao's pupils constricted. He wasn't even able to gauge how profoundly powerful this old man was, but a sensation of danger flooded through him nonetheless. It was almost as if the person standing in front of him was not a cultivator, but some primordial wild beast. Without even thinking about it, Meng Hao reached down toward his bag of holding. The man looked deeply at Meng Hao and then said, "Do not attempt any other methods to achieve victory. Body cultivators grow more powerful by engaging in more battle and making the heart invincible. If one resorts to trickery, the heart will be unstable. It might seem harmless at first, but in the end, your path will become more and more narrow until you are unable to achieve true success in body cultivating." A tremor ran through Meng Hao, and he was silent for a moment, as if having experienced a moment of enlightenment. The hand he had been moving toward his bag of holding slowly stopped in place. Finally, he looked at the old man, took a deep breath, and then clasped hands and bowed. When he looked up, his eyes shone with the desire to do battle. At the same time, his body surged with a bit more energy than before. His energy even seemed a bit purer, as if some new willpower had awoken within him. The old man nodded, his eyes shining with approval. "First fist, life extermination fist," the old man said coolly. Then he slowly lifted his hand up and clenching it tight. It seemed like an ordinary fist, except that he placed his thumb between his middle and ring fingers. It poked out just a little bit, creating a small point of invulnerability. As he punched, it was clear that there was no magical technique involved. However, a massive wind blasted out, so icy cold that it seemed to be a wind of total annihilation. As soon as the wind began to blow, the entire world turned gray, as if the fist could extinguish all life in the entire world. Meng Hao even felt the flame of his life force flickering on the point of extinguishing, thanks to the profundity of the fist. His heart trembled, and he suddenly had the feeling that if a planet were struck by this fist, all living things on it would die. An extermination of life. This was the life extermination fist. Meng Hao felt like he was suffocating in a cave of ice, and yet his desire to do battle erupted. He formed his right hand into a fist, filling it with the power of his cultivation base, his willpower, and fleshly body power. His blood thrummed as he unleashed the fist of the immortal realm paragon. BOM. They met in midair, and when their fists slammed into each other, Meng Hao's entire body shook violently. He coughed up a massive mouthful of blood and was sent staggering backward 300 meters. There, he coughed up another mouthful of blood, which was pitch black. Furthermore, as soon as the blood sprayed out of his mouth, it immediately froze solid. Cracking sounds could be heard as a layer of ice instantly spread out to cover Meng Hao. A moment later, Meng Hao shook and the ice shattered. He was pale and ashen as he looked over at the old man, shaken. The destructive power of that one punch was shocking to the extreme. Furthermore, he could even sense that the old man hadn't used the full power of the fist. Extermination, he murmured. The life extermination fist can exterminate all living things, the old man said coolly. It can destroy any creature or being. This fist strike was created for the Tao of death. By attacking with a will of death, the body cultivator can murder gods. Meng Hao's mind quivered as if struck by lightning. He took a deep breath, then closed his eyes and contemplated the meaning of the old man's fist strike. When the old man saw this, he looked surprised and gazed more deeply at Meng Hao. Finally, a look of praise appeared on his face. Meanwhile, outside of the stone steel, the fact that Meng Hao withstood the first fist strike resulted in his name moving up again. Now, he was in 4th place. Although it was only an increase of a single position, the fact that it was the top 10, or really, the top 5, ensured that the disciples of the 9 Seas God world were completely shocked. Fan Donger's face was pale white. She knew she had lost, and yet wasn't willing to accept that. She still believed that the only way Meng Hao could reach his current ranking was if he had cheated. Time passed. This time, 4 full hours passed before Meng Hao finally opened his eyes. Looking at the old man, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. "Understand?" the old man asked. Kind of, Meng Hao responded truthfully. "Well, mostly not." The old man laughed heartily. "Well, it doesn't matter. Why don't you try out my second fist strike, the self-immolation fist, also known as the bedevilment fist?" As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and raised his right hand into a fist. His thumb's position was normal, without the special finger positioning from the life extermination fist. It looked completely like a normal fist as he punched out. However, as the punch rocketed forth, an energy rose up from the old man that caused wild colors to flash in the sky. A massive wind kicked up that could shake heavenly bodies. The energy itself caused blood to ooze out of the corners of Meng Hao's mouth, and he was shoved backward relentlessly, denying him any opportunity to counterattack. That energy was the result of the old man's willpower, a madness and obsession that was capable of paying any price to fuel the destructive power of his fist. It was a level of obsession so high that it could turn one into a devil. Rather than an act of self-immolation, it was like a bedevilment. The fist strike shattered the void, crushed heaven and earth, and could not be reined in without shedding blood. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and he staggered backward. He didn't even dare to consider a counterattack. He had the intense premonition that if he did, he would be destroyed in body and spirit. There was something fatal about the power of that fist, and yet, even as Meng Hao fell into retreat, the old man roared, "Use what you learned of the life extermination fist, otherwise you're dead." Meng Hao looked up, his eyes shot with blood, and took a deep breath. Then he clenched his fist, placing his thumb between the middle and ring fingers. Using what he had just learned about the life extermination fist, he punched out. Beneath the power of the bedevilment fist, Meng Hao's life force was flickering out. A feeling of death filled him, and yet he used that will of death to launch the punch. It was as if something in his mind snapped, and he achieved a higher level of enlightenment. His body trembled as he understood the true, deeper meaning of the life extermination fist. Everything was much clearer than before. "I understand." His fist, which was already flying through the air, trembled slightly. Then it surged with a mad energy that hadn't been there before. A huge wind sprang up, which, under the influence of his fist strike, transformed into a wind of slaughter. Everything around him iced over, and the power of extermination rose up, slamming into the bedevilment fist. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and he spun backward as violently as a kite with its string suddenly cut. Great mouthfuls of blood were vomited out, and yet his hoarse, excited voice could be heard. "Life extermination fist. I understand. Life extermination fist." The old man smiled, returning his fist to his side as he watched Meng Hao fall and cough up more blood. However, Meng Hao's eyes gleamed with intense focus and determination as he looked back at the old man and bowed deeply. "Please accept my undying thanks for passing on this technique to me," he said. "You are not a body cultivator and have not experienced baptism in the blood of a god," replied the old man. "Therefore, you cannot withstand my third fist strike. Go, wait until you have become stronger and then come find me again. Remember, we cultivators didn't originally practice body cultivation. The purpose of body cultivation is to slay gods. If you have an opportunity in the future to slay a god, then you can be baptized in its blood. At that time, you can acquire your own battle body. The old man waved his hand, causing the world around Meng Hao to collapse into pieces. Meng Hao felt himself spinning, and everything turned into a blur. At the same time, an unprecedentedly brilliant light shone from the ninth Golden Gate stone steel. Massive rumbling echoed out to fill the entire Nine Seas God world. All disciples of the Nine Seas God world could sense it, and especially the Tao Realm patriarchs. All of them looked over as Meng Hao's name rose from the fourth position, all the way to the second position. Clearly, the old man felt that Meng Hao was more qualified than the person who had previously reached second place by withstanding the second fist strike. The god world was in an uproar. All cultivators were shaking, and gasps of astonishment rang out in all directions. Second place, Meng Hao reached the second position on the list. Of the 4 celestial warriors who have eternally maintained the top positions, 3 were pushed aside by him. He definitely deserves his positions of chosen, crown prince of the Fang clan, and joint conclave disciple of the 3 great Taoist societies. As the crowds raved, Fan Donger's face grew paler than ever. Golden light shone up from the steel, and Meng Hao's figure gradually appeared in front of all the crowds. As soon as he materialized, he didn't glance at anyone, not even Fan Donger. Instead, he turned and looked at the name which occupied the first position on the list. He very much wanted to know who it was that could withstand the old man's third fist strike. Zhang Wuya, he murmured. 1. Zhang Wuya's name in Chinese is Chinese letter. Zhang Wuya. Zhang is a surname which is also a common character that has multiple meanings including vertical, release, and jump. Wuya means boundless or limitless. I often ask Madame Deathblade, what kind of name is this? What does it feel like? When I asked her that question for this name, she snorted coldly and said, it sounds like an wuxia name. He might be someone from ancient times, and might not even exist in the Nine Seas God world anymore. However, Meng Hao still wanted to know his name. Anyone who had never experienced the power of that old man's fist strike would be eternally incapable of understanding how terrifying the life extermination fist and the bedevilment fist were to experts who practiced cultivation of the fleshly body. As of this moment, Zhang Wuya's name was deeply imprinted in Meng Hao's mind. Chapter 1052, Passing on Body Cultivation Techniques. Chapter 1053, Demonic Provocation. At the same time that Meng Hao appeared, the disciples in the area were thrown into an uproar. Even the disciples who hated Meng Hao couldn't help but acknowledge that he was incredibly powerful. The position of his name on the ranking list on the 9th Golden Gate stone steel left a deep impression on their hearts. Second place. From ancient times until now, the top 4 spots on that name list had never changed. On this day, however, Meng Hao had risen from the very bottom of the list all the way to the second position. Many people speculated that there must be a vast gap separating the first and second positions on that list. However, only Meng Hao knew how vast that gap was. Perhaps after he completely refined the Paragon's blood and then used it to fully fuse with a nirvana fruit, then he would be qualified to once again challenge the 9th Golden Gate stone steel and feel the power of the fist that came after the life extermination fist and the self-immolation fist, the third fist strike. That third fist would surely be spectacular to the extreme, capable of destroying heaven and earth. It was likely the pinnacle of body cultivation. Refining more Paragon's blood required more immortal jade and spirit stones. Now that he had reached second place on the 9th Golden Gate stone steel, he would receive a hefty reward. Meng Hao looked over at the stone steel and the description of the rewards. After making some calculations, his eyes shone with anticipation. A moment later, as the golden light slowly faded away, Meng Hao turned, flashing through the crowd like lighting toward the pale-faced Fan Donger. Cheater, she said, glaring at him. Gritting her teeth, she pulled a bag of holding out and threw it over to Meng Hao. She might have lost, but she was no sore loser. At the same time, though, her revulsion toward Meng Hao grew even stronger. Expression extremely grim, she turned to leave. She was worried that if she didn't leave quickly, she would lose control and attack Meng Hao, leading to a big battle. Considering how terrifyingly powerful he was now, she knew that she had no chance of winning. Meng Hao caught the bag of holding. After scanning it with divine sense, he smiled. In his opinion, although Fan Donger had many weaknesses, she also had her strengths and was something that he greatly admired. That was, she didn't refuse to accept losing. Meng Hao cleared his throat. He was not the type to secretly spare people. If he had an enemy and their differences could not be resolved easily, then in his opinion there was no need to even try. And in fact, he might as well pile on a bit more discomfort. Meng Hao had always been that way. Therefore he smiled and said, "Junior Sister Donger, there are still 8 more stone steels. I feel bad for winning so easily. Why don't we make another bet? What do you say?" Fan Donger gritted her teeth. Not bothering to even turn around and look at him, she transformed into a colorful beam of light that sped off into the distance. Meng Hao felt a bit bad. His words were actually just idle banter. He wasn't very confident about the other Golden Gate stone steel trials by fire. If Fan Donger had agreed to continue betting, he would have been forced to delay the matter. Looking around at all the surrounding disciples of the Nine Seas God world, he sighed. Without a believable accomplice, it's hard to get things done. If I had someone to help, I might have been able to charge people to watch. Yet another lost opportunity for profit. Meng Hao's heart hurt at the thought of the spirit stones, which, although they didn't actually belong to him, represented a missed opportunity all the same. What a headache. Everyone else worries about cultivation, but I'm always worried about having to make money. Feeling quite bitter, he shook his head and flew quickly over toward one of the other Golden Gate stone steels. If he was going to challenge them, then he would need to study them individually. That would give him the best chance to maximize their profitability. When Meng Hao left, most of the other disciples followed along with him. Soon, the entire group arrived at the 8th Golden Gate stone steel. Shockingly, almost in the same moment that they arrived, 9 beams of colorful light appeared up above, screaming through the air toward the same location. Shocking rumbling like that of thunder clouds could be heard, accompanied by the ripples of the ancient realm. In the blink of an eye, the beams of light closed in on the stone steel to reveal 9 demonic cultivators. Of those 9, 7 were men and 2 were women. All were exceedingly attractive and looked almost exactly like cultivators, with the exception of the fish scale mark they all had on their foreheads. Another shocking thing about them was that each and every one appeared to have 3 or 4 extinguished soul lamps. These were obviously not ordinary early ancient realm cultivators. These were chosen who were close to the mid-ancient realm. It's them, the 9 sea realm demons. They're actually making a public appearance. How rare. The 20 most famous disciples in the 9 seas God world, the weakest is the divine daughter Fan Donger, although she has one of the highest ranks. In addition to her, there are the 9 divine offspring. They have profound cultivation bases, and although they were once chosen, they've now entered the early ancient realm. The demonic cultivator horde is similar. They have a sea daughter who is analogous to the divine daughter. In addition, they have the 9 sea realm demons, who are similar to the divine offspring. Immediately, all of the demonic cultivators in the area started getting very excited. Meng Hao's eyes flickered when he caught sight of the 9 demonic cultivators. They looked back at him, their eyes flickering with sinister light. Each and every one of them could exert threatening pressure on Meng Hao. After all, they were all in the ancient realm. There were 2 who Meng Hao found the most threatening. Both were men, one of whom had a triangular scale on his forehead and whose pupils were also triangular, making him look very bizarre. The other appeared to be the youngest among the group of 9. He was incredibly attractive and wore beautiful clothing. His forehead had no scale on it, but rather a mark in the shape of a sea dragon. He emanated the air of a ruler or king that spread out in all directions. He was the number 1 demon among the 9 sea realm demons. Meng Hao looked away from them and proceeded to head toward the 8th Golden Gate stone steel. A moment after he stepped inside, the 9 sea realm demons did the same. Countless eyes were fixed on the developing situation. The demonic cultivators hated Meng Hao, a fact that had already spread throughout the entire sect. For the 9 sea realm demons to show up here led everyone to the same conclusion. The demonic cultivator horde was making a move on Meng Hao. It was not a direct attack, but rather an attack on the prestige that he was gaining, to use the trials by fire to keep his growing popularity in check. They were going to use this as a chance to create a clear comparison. I wonder what ranking Meng Hao will achieve this time. The surrounding cultivators were buzzing with excitement, yet some of them were still skeptical of Meng Hao. Although Meng Hao had proved how powerful his fleshly body was in the 9th Golden Gate, it was entirely possible that he wouldn't perform well in the others. The truth of the matter was that was exactly how it was. After enough time for an incense stick to pass, Meng Hao's name appeared on the Golden Gate stone steel, flickering with shining light. His name showed up somewhere in the 100s before he appeared outside. Almost in the same moment that Meng Hao appeared outside, shockingly, 9 names that were already in the top 20 positions on the list moved up. Highest among all the newly risen was the name Long Tianhai. Earlier, that name had been in the 7th position, but it was now in the 4th. Long Tianhai, he's the #1 demon among the 9 Sea Realm demons. I can't believe he just got into the 4th position. The demonic cultivator horde is favored by the 9th Sea. In terms of cultivation and enlightenment, they have it so easy. Besides, they were actually born in the pressure of the 9th Sea. Once they leave it, their cultivation bases will rocket up like mad. The spectators were in an uproar as 9 figures emerged from the stone steel. It was none other than the 9 Sea Realm demons, who all looked over at Meng Hao with sneers that they made no attempt to cover up. So, the crown prince of the Fang clan turns out to be pretty lame. You would think that, with his cultivation base, he would at least make it into the top 100. That's the joint disciples of all of the 3 great Taoist societies. He's too weak to withstand a single blow from one of us. He can't even make it into the top 100, and yet still has the face to stick around in the 9 Seas God world. You can't say that. Maybe he just doesn't care about the trials by fire. He just has an overinflated reputation that he can't live up to. If you had to blame anything, you should probably blame his arrogance and conceit. The 9 demonic cultivators didn't hold anything back as they uttered various derisive and mocking words. The disciples of the 9 Seas God world were shocked, and many of them felt that Meng Hao must be extremely weak. Fan Donger accused him of cheating in the 9th Golden Gate Stone Steel. From the look of things, he really was. Otherwise, how could there be such a huge gap now? The results were clear. The 9 demonic cultivators went into the stone steel at the same time as Meng Hao and had all placed in the top 20. The best of their group had even taken 4th place. In contrast, Meng Hao was in the 100s. Normally speaking, if you didn't compare him to others, placing the way he did on his first try would be exceptional. After all, he didn't go all out, he merely went in to observe a bit. However, because of the contrast in performances, the surrounding disciples of the 9 Seas God world were all startled to find that Meng Hao actually seemed really weak in comparison. Meng Hao looked coldly over at the 9 demonic cultivators, who stared back at him with expressions of blatant provocation and mockery. As for Long Tianhai, his expression was extremely calm. However, it was calm in an arrogant way, as if Meng Hao were an ant that he didn't even need to think about and could crush underfoot with a mere thought. He maintained his silence and didn't say anything in response. He turned and headed toward the 7th Golden Gate Stone Steel, followed by the 9 Sea Realm demons. They all arrived shortly thereafter at the 7th Stone Steel, after which Meng Hao entered. The 9 demonic cultivators followed suit, clearly hoping to humiliate Meng Hao. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, Meng Hao appeared. This time he performed a bit better than before, ending up in the 90s. However, moments later, golden light shone up from the names of the 9 Sea Realm demons. Although they didn't make incredible progress, there were some in the top 20. Long Tianhai didn't make it to 5th place, but rather 7th. Another of the 9 demonic cultivators made it into the 9th position. It was another clear contrast. Next was the 6th Golden Gate Stone Steel, followed by the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, and the 2nd. The 9 demonic cultivators stuck as close to Meng Hao as vengeful ghosts. Every trial by fire he entered, they entered too. The result was that they completely exceeded him, and it was obvious as a slap to the face. After every single trial by fire, they would utter some derisive words, the acidity of which only continued to grow. Their words were clever, and they made no effort to conceal the fact that they were taunting him. Meng Hao's face grew icier. He didn't try very hard in any of the trials by fire, and as such, didn't allow their words to rile him. He knew that, for the moment, his level of power wasn't sufficient to exceed them. All he wanted to do was observe the trials by fire and get used to them. It didn't matter if he only got into the top 100 or so. At the moment, he wasn't ready to truly challenge them. Soon, he had passed through the rest of the stone steels. The final trial by fire tested one's ability to stand up to crushing pressure. After looking the steel over, Meng Hao decided not to challenge it and turned to leave. At this point, the 9 demonic cultivators started laughing coldly. Some of the other disciples of the 9 Seas God world were able to tell what was going on, and yet the buzz that had built up because of his amazing performance in the 9th Golden Gate Stone Steel was now dying out. In fact, there were even people who were now almost convinced that he was a cheater. Although Meng Hao looked like he wanted to leave, but it didn't seem that the 9 demonic cultivators were going to let him. Meng Hao, what do you say to bet? Do you dare? One of the 9 demonic cultivators taunted, the ridicule in his tone clear as his voice echoed about. Chapter 1054, Little Haoui needs to be a good boy. Meng Hao was just about to leave when he heard the words and stopped in place, his heart thumping. He slowly turned to look back at the 9 Sea Realm demons, who had repeatedly done everything they could to provoke him. Although he was truly convinced that his own excessive killing had caused this irreconcilable conflict, the regret he felt was mostly gone thanks to the actions of these demonic cultivators. Sometimes it doesn't matter who is right or wrong. Sometimes the only thing that matters is who has the power to back up their words. Only the powerful could back up what they said. As soon as Meng Hao heard the Sea Realm demon mention the word bet, he thought for a moment and then smiled. It was a bashful smile and a bit apologetic. I don't think that's a good idea, he said hesitantly. Cut the crap, said the demonic cultivator. Do you have the guts to make the bet or not? Immediately, the other Sea Realm demons started laughing. As for Long Tianhai, he looked over with cool indifference. They didn't know Meng Hao, so they had no idea that concealed beneath that bashful smile was a temper so violent that even words like conniption or paroxysm couldn't describe it. No bets for me. Meng Hao took a deep breath and decided to take the high road for once. He once again turned to leave. So it turns out that the crown prince of the Fang clan doesn't dare to make real bets, said the 7th of the 9 demonic cultivators. The only thing he can do is bully Fandonger. His words were venomous and cold, and instantly put Meng Hao in a bad position with the other disciples of the 9 Seas God world. Crown Prince, PSHHH week seems like the Fang clan is nothing special after all. Don't even mention the thing about being a joint disciple of the 3 great Taoist societies. This guy is as cowardly as a mouse. The demonic cultivators continued to spew increasingly vitriolic words. Their taunts were reaching the point of being direct verbal attacks. Meng Hao once again stopped in place and slowly turned around. His face was bright red, as if he was barely capable of containing his rage as he stared at the 9 cultivators, panting. What a bore, this guy can't do anything other than cheat. Useless. Even when making bets, the only thing he can do is bully girls. Screw him. All right, what do you want to bet? Growled Meng Hao through gritted teeth. He glared at the demonic cultivators and took a few steps backward, as if he were bracing himself to do something he didn't want to do, but had no choice but to do. The 9 demons of the Sea Realm looked at him with cold smiles. The person to reply was the 3rd demon, a woman. Well, she said, obviously we'll bet to see if you can get into the top 10 of one of the other Golden Gate stone steals, without cheating like you did in the 9th steal, of course. As for the stakes, let's say 100,000 immortal jades, as well as 5 million spirit stones. If you can't get into the top 10, you don't have to pay any spirit stones, you just have to get the hell out of the 9th sea. And if you ever step half a foot back inside, you'll be killed in body and spirit. Meng Hao's face twitched slightly, and after taking a deep breath, he started laughing loudly. What piddly stakes, you want to bet with me like that? Fandonger and I have a long-standing friendship that you don't even know about. Our bet from before was just for fun. If you really want to make a wager, then you have to put up 10 million immortal jades. Do you have the guts to make the bet, or not? Meng Hao spoke the words especially loudly. After pausing for the space of a few breaths without hearing a response, he started to laugh coldly. If you don't have the guts, then forget about it, he said, quickly backing up as if he wanted to take advantage of the silence to leave. You're on, Long Tianhai said coolly, his first time speaking. However, if you lose, you'll have to leave behind your 4 limbs for us as a souvenir. His words instantly caused the other 8 demonic cultivators to look very excited. You, said Meng Hao, appearing to be very shocked. His face was extremely grim as he stared back at Long Tianhai. Finally, he took a deep breath, gritted his teeth hard and said in a cautionary tone, what I said was 10 million immortal jades per Golden Gate stone steel. With 8 steals, that means that if I can get into the top 10 of all of them, you'll owe me 80 million. Gasps could be heard in the crowd, from both ordinary cultivators and demonic cultivators alike. This was an incredible, shocking wager, the types of which were rarely seen in the 9th mountain and sea. 80 million immortal jades. Heavens, how many spirit stones would that be worth? Enough to equal the life savings of an entire mid-sized clan of cultivators. These people are crazy. Even as the crowd went into an uproar, the 9 Sea Realm demons were internally shaken by Meng Hao's words. Even Long Tianhai's face fell. 10 million pieces of immortal jade was a sum they could just barely scrape together. As for 80 million, that far exceeded their limit. Even for the demonic cultivator horde as a whole, it was no small amount. The other 8 demonic cultivators hesitated. Their plan to make a bet with Meng Hao had been come up with on the fly, and had quickly reached the point that they didn't dare make any decisions unilaterally. All of them turned to look at Long Tianhai. An unsightly expression could be seen on his face as he stared at Meng Hao. Meng Hao seemingly sighed inwardly, and was just about to speak up as if he were going to give the demonic cultivators a way out of the bet, when Long Tianhai's eyes glittered. "You're on," he said. "However, we're going to change things a bit. If you don't get into the top 10 of all of the Golden Gate stone steals, then not only do you have to forfeit your 4 limbs, you also have to give me your place in the echelon." After the words left Long Tianhai's mouth, utter silence reigned. Most people had no idea what the echelon was. However, from the way the 3 great Taoist societies treated Meng Hao, people could speculate. The matter of the echelon was not something that could be kept secret forever, which Meng Hao knew. That was why he had taken the initiative to bring up the matter publicly earlier. Sometimes a matter being public, rather than secret, can lead to certain unexpected advantages. Deep in Meng Hao's eyes was a flickering coldness that no one could detect as he looked at Long Tianhai. They stared at each other for a moment, and within Long Tianhai's eyes, Meng Hao saw no trace of the coolness and disregard from earlier. Instead, he saw schemes and deceit. He was putting on an act earlier, he thought, eyes glittering. Finally, he smiled coldly and said, "Well, in that case, I don't need 80 million. I want 300 million immortal jades. Add in 1 Dao weapon, and Meng Hao will take this bet with your demonic cultivator horde." Meng Hao's words were met with a chorus of gasps from the audience. 300 million immortal jades was an astronomical sum. It was terrifying even to think about. Even for the 4 great clans, it would be a deleterious blow to be forced to hand over so much money. As for the 9 Seas God world, their reserves might be deep, but the demonic cultivator horde only had access to 30% of the clan's resources. If they lost, it would be a severe blow to their foundation. As for a Dao weapon, that was a magical item that only a Dao realm expert could wield. Such things were rare in the 9th mountain and sea, and in fact, only 3 existed, one of which was in the possession of the demonic cultivator horde. If they lost the bet, and the weapon, it couldn't quite measure up to the value of a place in the echelon. However, if they won, it would all be worth it. The crowd was in an uproar, and the noise only continued to get louder. An incredible wager like this was enough to cause cultivators of all realms to be filled with excitement. The 9 Sea Realm demons all sucked in deep breaths. Long Tianhai remained silent for a moment before a bizarre gleam appeared in his eyes. Considering that Meng Hao had mentioned the demonic cultivator horde, he knew that Meng Hao had already pieced together some clues as to what was really going on. However, he didn't care. What he wanted was Meng Hao's place in the echelon. Before Meng Hao had arrived in the 9th Sea, he had put various plans in place. He had never imagined that one of the first things Meng Hao would do after arriving would be to immediately reveal publicly that he was in the echelon. Now that many people knew about the matter, most of his plans were rendered unusable. However, the stakes Meng Hao had mentioned just now were vast, and were somewhat imbalanced when compared to a place in the echelon. It was a decision he couldn't make on his own, so he stood there silently for a moment, apparently conferring with someone. Finally, he gritted his teeth and looked over at Meng Hao, a gleam of determination in his eyes. "The Dao weapon is off the table, but the 300 million pieces of immortal jade, we can do." As soon as the words left his mouth, Meng Hao sighed with relief. He had brought up the Dao weapon as a way to test out how determined the demonic cultivator horde was. If they were even willing to put a Dao weapon on the table as stakes, then he would have immediately declined the wager. No matter how much face he lost, he would never have agreed. The fact that the demonic cultivator horde refused to put the Dao weapon up as stakes revealed that there was a possibility that the result of the bet would be upheld. This matter most likely involved the machinations of a Dao realm expert. However, Meng Hao knew that in all matters, risks had to be taken. His eyes shone with a strange light as he looked over at Long Tianhai. "This is a big matter. I'll give you my answer in a month." Having said that, he turned and shot off into the distance. Waiting for a month gave him the option of both going on the offensive or remaining on the defensive. Furthermore, it negated the previous comparisons that had been made between him and the 9 Sea Realm demons. Everyone was now completely focused on the matter of the wager. Long Tianhai also realized this. He watched coldly as Meng Hao left, his eyes flickering with a gleam of killing intent. Meng Hao transformed into a beam of light that shot back toward his immortal's cave. After passing down through the water and the shield, the first thing he saw was the parrot, surrounded by the two trembling blackpot imps. The parrot started singing, after which the demonic cultivators chimed in. I was a bad kid when I was young. I'm a little seafood dish, la 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 la, little seafood dish, doba doba doo, little seafood dish. Meng Hao stood there silently for a moment, staring at them, after which they switched to a different song. Come, come, the parrot shouted excitedly. Last night Lord Fifth had a dream about another song. Once we get it down, Lord Fifth is going to host a big singing contest for the entire Ninth Mountain and Sea. All right, sing with me. Off to the side, the meat jelly started to beat a drum enthusiastically. We're all seafood, our whole family is seafood. Righteous Lord Fifth, mighty Lord Third, la 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 la, we have to make the seafood be good. Doba doba doo, we have to make the seafood be good. When Meng Hao heard this, his mind spun, and all of a sudden the world seemed like a worse place. He felt bad for the demonic cultivators as well as Su Yan. At the moment, Su Yan seemed to be deeply shaken. She was staring at the parrot with gaping jaw, as if the parrot had completely turned her world upside down. Meng Hao cleared his throat and waved his hand toward the blackpot imps that seemed to be acting like backup singers next to the parrot. Instead of resisting him, they gladly flew toward him as if he were rescuing them from a disaster. Immediately, they transformed into black pods that came to rest on his palm, after which he stowed them away in his bag of holding. The parrot didn't look happy. Glaring at Meng Hao, it said, Come, come. Lord Fifth just thought of a new song. Let's all sing it together. Little Haowie needs to be a good boy. A brutal gleam appeared in Meng Hao's eyes as he stared at the parrot for a moment. Then he ignored it, turning and walking back into his residence. The wave of a hand caused a ceiling shield to appear that blocked out all of the racket from outside. Moments later, the puppet boy flew out to go collect his reward from the 9th Golden Gate Stone Steel, and the smaller rewards for making it into the top 100 of the other 8 stone steels. Meng Hao sat down cross-legged, took a deep breath, and then gazed at the copper mirror with a look of anticipation. This time, I'm pretty sure I got enough immortal jade to complete my work with the Paragon's blood. Chapter 1055. Which Paragon did this blood come from? Not too much time passed before the puppet boy returned. Just as Ling Yunzi had said, a greater reward than usual was doled out to him and placed in a bag of holding. He hefted the bag of holding, scanning it with divine sense for a moment before beginning to pant. He quickly retracted his divine sense, unable to bear looking at the contents. What was inevitably about to happen caused his heart such grief that it felt as if it were being cut in half with a knife. Therefore, he chose not to think about it. This was a precious skill that Meng Hao had picked up recently. He sighed, gritted his teeth, and took out a vial of Paragon's blood to begin duplicating. Time passed. Meng Hao's eyes were shot with blood, and his hair was disheveled crazily as he fed immortal jade and spirit stones into the copper mirror. Grimacing, he produced one duplicate after another. Eventually, 7 days passed. Meng Hao had now been in the 9 Seas God world for the greater part of a month. Finally, his bag of holding was completely devoid of all immortal jade and spirit stones, and there in front of him was a collection of 100 vials of Paragon's blood. As he looked at the blood, he began to pant. He kept telling himself not to think about how much he had spent to get this much, and yet he couldn't stop himself. As soon as the slightest thought of it crossed his mind, his heart twisted into a knot. When I was young, I always wanted to be rich. After I started practicing cultivation, there were often times when I felt like a rich person. However, it always takes the mere blink of an eye for all of that to go away, and I'm destitute again. He wanted to cry, but no tears would come. He wasn't sure if his lifelong dream would ever actually come true. After taking some deep breaths, his eyes filled with determination, and he produced a vast collection of medicinal pills. He put them in his mouth and refrained from chewing them. He merely allowed them to begin to slowly dissolve. Finally, he waved his hand and caused 10 vials of Paragon's blood to fly out. Cracking sounds could be heard as the bottles shattered, and the blood itself swirled out into the air. Ripples began to spread out as he raised both, and began to mold the Paragon's blood together into one glob. After it did, a terrifying aura began to spread out. Parrot, meat jelly, get over here and help stop this aura from spreading out. His words echoed out at the same time that the parrot was encouraging the demonic cultivators to sing. After it heard what he said, it muttered a few sentences to itself, then flapped its wings and flew over with the meat jelly to help suppress the aura of the paragon's blood. Meng Hao took a deep breath as he waved his right hand, causing 10 more vials of paragon's blood to fly out and shatter. The blood then merged into a larger sphere in front of him. The terrifying aura exploded out violently, spreading out in all directions, causing the residents around him to shake so violently it seemed it might collapse. Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly, and without any hesitation he waved his hand again. 10 more vials worth of paragon's blood collapsed and then reformed. The terrifying aura increased in intensity, and cracks spread out through the entire residence. It was at this point that the parrot arrived. It no longer looked calm and collected, but rather let out a loud howl as it went all out to suppress the aura. The meat jelly didn't seem very willing to cooperate, but it transformed into an enormous canopy nonetheless, which covered over the entire residence, completely preventing the aura from escaping into the outside world. Because of Meng Hao's proximity to the combination of 30 vials of paragon's blood, the intense pressure caused him to shake violently. However, his eyes shone brightly with determination. 30%, he breathed. The pressure of the blood caused him to shake and cracking sounds could be heard. His mind was spinning violently. He gritted his teeth and waved his hand again. Rumbling sounds could be heard as 10 more vials of blood shattered. The blood flew out to join the huge sphere. Now it was roughly the size of an infant's hand. It was bright red, and shockingly, strands of gold could be seen swirling around inside, making it resplendently beautiful to the point where it tugged at the soul. At the same time, increasingly intense pressure was cast out by the terrifying aura. The explosive power battered against Meng Hao, causing blood to ooze out of his mouth and fissures to spread out across his skin. There was also a powerful expulsion force that threatened to cause him to explode. His eyes shone brightly with obsession as he rotated his cultivation base, drawing on all the power of his immortal meridians, using his secret magic to make them all eternal. Their power surged in his body as he waved his hand again, causing 10 more vials to fly out and shatter. When the blood merged into the sphere, terrifying aura erupted with further intensity. The pressure was now so incredible that it caused Meng Hao's entire residence to collapse into pieces. The entire structure transformed into nothing more than ash. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and his hands almost shattered. His eternal stratum surged at full power, continuously healing him, allowing him to fight back against the intense power. The meat jelly roared and the parrot squawked shrilly, as they suppressed the aura with all of their might as well. Meng Hao was shaking, and his eyes gleamed with madness. 50%, he waved his hand, causing another 10 vials of paragon's blood to fly out. When they merged into the sphere, he sent out another 10, all the way until a total of 80 vials had been added together. It was now as large as an infant's head, and the pressure caused colors to flash and the sky to grow dim. Meng Hao felt like he was the subject of an intensely powerful attack. He was shoved backward, and blood spewed out of his mouth. His eternal stratum worked like mad, but was incapable of keeping pace with the level of destruction, not even with all of his 123 immortal meridians combined. At this critical juncture, he didn't hesitate for even a moment to chomp down on half of the medicinal pills he had in his mouth. Immediately, they melted, flowing into his body with restorative energy. His immortal power was once again restored, and he managed to bear the brunt of another aggressive blast. The sphere of blood radiated resplendent light, as if the will of a paragon were now awakening. If it wasn't for the meat jelly and the parrot blocking the spread of the aura, the entire 9 Seas God world would be going completely crazy. The 9th sea would be aboil, and the entire 9th mountain would be shaking. However, even though the aura still wasn't leaking out, the natural law in the area around Meng Hao was being affected. The air filled with distortions, as if another world were forming. All of that was because of the paragon's blood. It was not merely a single portion, but 80 portions that had been merged together. It hadn't even been refined yet, and was only an amalgamation, yet it was still a sample of paragon's blood that was only a sliver away from being complete. "I can do it," Meng Hao roared, waving his hand. Rumbling could be heard as the final 20 vials of blood flew out. Half of them shattered, and the blood in them fused with the sphere. Meng Hao's hands were mangled masses of flesh, and he suddenly coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. However, a moment ago, he had crushed more of the medicinal pills in his mouth, causing their power to flow through his body and stimulate his eternal stratum into frenzied action. The mouthful of blood he had just coughed up didn't do anything to affect the fusion of the paragon's blood. The meat jelly roared with increased intensity as the canopy it had formed fought to control the aura. The parrot was in midair, squawking as it caused numerous streams of magical symbols to swirl down and seal the entire area. Damn it, this isn't the Demon Granny's blood. She might be a paragon, but this drop of blood was definitely not produced by her. How could an unrefined drop of blood contain such shocking power? The last 10 vials. Meng Hao chomped down on all of the remaining medicinal pills, then waved his hand to cause the final 10 vials to shatter. Blood flew out into the sphere, which was now the size of an adult human head. The sphere of blood contained innumerable golden threads that interlocked with each other, forming vague magical symbols that seemed to contain the origin of the starry sky, the essence of the world, the basis of all life. The meat jelly was shaking violently, and fissures snaked out across its body. It looked like it was about to collapse, and it was shrieking in pain. The parrot was getting very nervous, almost like he had during the unforeseen flare-up of the copper mirror. "It's not the Demon Granny's blood, and it's not old man immortal ancients either," the parrot shrieked, staring in shock and disbelief. "Could it be? Could it be that this? No way, impossible. Didn't he die? As soon as he died, all of his blood should have vanished from within heaven and earth. How could there be some left behind? Damn it, no wonder the mirror was acting so crazy. I thought that it was because someone was casting magic on it, but that was only one part of it. The other reason was because of this blood." Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and he trembled violently. Despite the preparations he had made with the medicinal pills, his eternal stratum was reaching the point where it couldn't sustain him. All of his flesh was covered with cracks and fissures, which were widening as if he might explode at any moment. His body was slick with blood, but his eyes were completely focused. His hands trembled as he held the sphere of blood between them and then shoved down hard. "Refine," he cried. The sphere of blood gradually began to shrink and refine. As it did, more and more golden threads became visible until in the end the entire mass of blood was golden. Meng Hao was shaking and more cracks spread out across his skin. He felt the flame of his life force growing dim, all because of the vast pressure cast by the aura of the paragon's blood. It was only a drop of blood, and yet Meng Hao was still no match for it. He was on the verge of collapsing. Even though the blood wasn't actually fighting him, it was still powerful enough to utterly exterminate him. It wasn't just Meng Hao. Someone in the ancient realm, or perhaps even someone in the Tao realm, would be slaughtered by this drop of blood. Rumbling sounds echoed out, but Meng Hao endured. His body hovered on the brink of exploding as the mass of blood rapidly shrank. Soon, it was only the size of an infant's hand. His body was covered in cracks and tears. His 2 hands were nothing but bloody flesh, disfigured and misshapen, and yet his eyes still shone with laser focus. "Refine," he roared. It was a roar like the final roar before death, and as soon as it left his mouth, the sphere of blood shrank down to the size of a fingernail. As of now, it was thoroughly and completely golden. The incomparable aura of a paragon instantly erupted from inside the blood. This was true, authentic paragon's blood. It was complete, utterly rare paragon's blood. You could even say that it actually shouldn't exist, a drop of blood from the exact paragon to whom the parrot had referred. The meat jelly was screaming and the parrot was bellowing in disbelief. Meng Hao was just barely managing to hold back from exploding when an aura appeared which was not the aura of cultivation. It was the aura of the League of Demon Sealers. As soon as the aura appeared, the drop of blood began to tremble. A resonance was forming, almost like that of a bloodline. What? Meng Hao thought, his mind trembling. Then he thought back to what Granny Nine and Godmaster had said to him. Paragon Sea Dream founded the Nine Seas God World and the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. The immortal ancient Taoist rite was founded by Paragon Immortal Ancient. As for the third paragon, the most powerful paragon, Paragon Nine Seals, nobody knew what he founded. He founded the League of Demon Sealers. Meng Hao felt as if his mind were being struck by lightning. Chapter 1056, The Mountains and Seas Are Rocked. This was the blood of Paragon Nine Seals, chief among the 3 supreme paragons. Not even a single drop should even exist in the world. And yet, because of the even more mysterious and unfathomable copper mirror, this paragon's blood had now appeared in the mountain and sea realm. The instant that the blood appeared, it wasn't just Meng Hao who was shaken. The entire mountain and sea realm began to tremble. It didn't matter that the parrot and meat jelly were covering up the aura with all their might. The aura still managed to spread out invisibly. Although nobody in the Nine Seas God world could sense it specifically, There were other beings in the mountain and sea realm who did, and were completely shocked. 9 great mountains and seas made up the mountain and sea realm, outside of which was a sun and a moon that orbited eternally around it. It was because of those 2 heavenly bodies that the mountain and sea realm had day and night. At the moment, both of them were trembling, something that caused everyone, even the mortals, to stare up in shock to look. As of this moment, people were trembling in shock in the 9th mountain and sea, the 8th mountain and sea, the 7th mountain and sea, even the 1st mountain and sea. In all the mountain and sea realm, people were shaking in astonishment. The sun is trembling. The moon is shaking. What's happening? What's causing this? Within the mountain and sea realm, countless living beings were flabbergasted. Even the animals were prostrating themselves on the ground as if in worship. The mortals were astonished and began bowing down with looks of pious reverence on their faces. As for the cultivators, their scalps tingled as they observed something they had never before seen, the sun and moon shaking. It left them completely astonished. Countless experts flew out, including all of the Tao realm cultivators of the mountain and sea realm, and the shock on their faces was clear. Numerous beings saw the sun and the moon shaking visibly. Instead of continuing on in their orbit, they were fixed in place, seemingly immovable. It was as if some unknown aura had caught their attention, causing their will to suddenly awaken. At the same time that the heavenly bodies ceased moving, the seas in the mountain and sea realm all began to seethe and roar. The mountains also began to shake, and were apparently roaring. If you looked very carefully at the sun, you would just barely be able to tell that inside of that heavenly body, shockingly, was a sword. It was a shining sword, shocking to the extreme. It was a sword that in the past had shaken the hearts of countless crowds of people and had killed innumerable enemies. That was the sword of a paragon. In the past, it had caused the entire immortal world to tremble, and during the great catastrophe, it had rocked the 3,000 lower realms. The other 2 major powers in the war shook any time they heard the name. 9 Seals Sword. When Paragon 9 Seals perished, his sword went missing. Now, though, it suddenly appeared in the middle of the sun, or perhaps, it wasn't just appearing there, perhaps. The sun of the mountain and sea realm was the manifestation of the 9 Seals sword of the past. Anyone who knew anything about the history of the mountain and sea realm suddenly felt their minds reeling. The 9 Seals sword, heavens, the sun is actually the materialization of the 9 Seals sword. How could this be possible? Impossible. This goes contrary to everything we know about history. How could this be happening? At the same time, a massive aura was awakening inside of the moon. Just barely, an object was becoming visible inside of it. It was not a sword, it was a suit of armor. A suit of armor formed from moonbeams. The armor shone with glorious light that was both soft and austere. It was as if the armor had been splashed with infinite amounts of blood, as if it had seen countless battles. In the past, the name of this suit of armor had rocked the world. 9 Seals Armor. Paragon 9 Seals, 2 great paragon artifacts. All of the 9 mountains and seas were completely shaken. I just remembered a legend I heard about once. Similar words were echoing in the minds of many of the Tao realm experts of the 9 mountains and seas. It was a story that all of them had taken to be completely wild and absurd. According to the legend, each mountain and sea in the realm will have a mountain and sea lord to unify that area. But the truth of the matter is that there is a position of power higher than that of the lords of the 9 mountains and seas, a more powerful being, the Lord of the mountain and sea realm. The Lord of the entire mountain and sea realm can exterminate a mountain and sea with a single thought, then create another one just as easily. That person will lead the mountain and sea realm back to the former glory of the Paragon immortal realm. The legend says that when the Lord of the mountain and sea realm finally appears, the sun and the moon will stop moving. Light will fill the entire mountain and sea realm. According to the legend, the 9 Chuanwu turtles will kowtow and let out a massive roar. Many of the Tao realm experts of the mountain and sea realm were murmuring things like this. In the 4th mountain and sea, K letter 1E63ITIGORBH's eyes were shining with a strange light as he looked up into the heavens and the starry sky. It was in that moment that, all of a sudden, a massive Chuanwu turtle rose up from within the celestial pond atop the 1st mountain, just like the Chuanwu turtle had done in the 9th mountain and sea. Apparently, all of the mountains had a Chuanwu turtle like this as their nucleus. The Chuanwu turtle opened its eyes, and it began to tremble, then let out a massive roar that filled the entire 1st mountain and sea. That roar filled the hearts and minds of all cultivators who had been born in the first mountain and sea. At almost exactly the same time, a similar roar could be heard coming from the Qianwu turtle who sat atop the second mountain in the second mountain and sea. Next, the same thing happened in the third mountain and sea, the fourth mountain and sea, and the fifth mountain and sea. Finally, the Qianwu turtle from the ninth mountain and sea joined in, and the roars combined into a unified sound that shook the entire mountain and sea realm. Countless individuals were shaken physically and mentally as the supreme Qianwu turtles, which represented all of the 9 mountains and seas, suddenly rose up into the starry sky, whereupon their roars reached a fever pitch. In the end, all of them did something completely shocking. They turned in the same direction and bowed as if they were offering respectful greetings to their lord. The direction in which they faced, shockingly, was the ninth mountain and sea. The entire world was shaken, and the whole mountain and sea realm was filled with rumbling sounds. As of this moment, countless Tao realm experts were thoroughly shaken. All of them turned to look in the direction of the ninth mountain and sea. As for the Tao realm experts in the ninth mountain and sea itself, they were dumbfounded. The strangest thing of all was that no one could tell exactly which area within the ninth mountain and sea the Qianwu turtles were facing. The roars of the 9 Qianwu turtles echoed out for a long time. The sound was archaic and icy cold, as if it was completely devoid of any emotion. It was almost as if it were mechanical. The realm lord cometh, the lord of all the mountain and sea realm. The 9 hexes shall be inscribed in the moment of his return to power. The word spread out throughout all of the 9 mountains and seas, echoing into countless minds, giving rise to waves of intense shock. It was as if the entire world had been overturned. All cultivators of the 9 mountains and seas felt as if their minds were being struck by hundreds of thousands of lightning bolts. Realm Lord, the Lord of the mountain and sea realm. What exactly is going on? What's happening? Return. Could it be that when the Realm Lord returns, the fate of all the 9 mountains and seas can be controlled by just a single one of his thoughts? The 9 Qianwu turtles are all facing the 9th mountain and sea. Could it be? Could it be that the so-called Realm Lord is in the 9th mountain and sea? Countless minds were sent spinning. On the 4 planets of the 9th mountain and sea, in the 4 great clans, the 5 great holy lands, and the 3 churches and 6 sects, all of the chosen were astonished and were shaking in anticipation. All of the Tao realm experts could see that the Qianwu turtle in their mountain and sea was looking at their own 9th mountain and sea. It was the same in the 3 great Taoist societies. In the 9 seas god world, Fan Donger, the demonic cultivators, the 3 patriarchs, and all of the other Tao realm cultivators were all shocked. Of course, none of them had any idea that all of these shocking events were being caused by someone within the 9 seas god world itself. Also astonished were the current mountain and sea lords of the 9 mountains and seas. All of them felt their energy surging, filling their respective mountains and seas with solemnity and a domineering air. Lord Jai also appeared in the 9th mountain and sea, and massive pressure radiated out from that enormous eye. These lords would not be willing to easily accept someone who was placed higher than them, a lord of the mountain and sea realm. Meanwhile, in the ruins of immortality in the 9th mountain and sea, the white-robed Paragon Sea Dream sat cross-legged in meditation. Li Linger sat next to her in exactly the same posture. Suddenly, Paragon Sea Dream opened her phoenix-like eyes and her expression flickered. A shocked expression appeared on her face, and she rose to her feet and stepped forward. When her foot landed, she was outside of the ruins of immortality, hovering in the starry sky, looking toward the 9th sea. "Big Brother 9 Seals, Paragon Blood," she murmured. A tremor ran through her, and a look of utter disbelief could be seen on her face. After a long moment, she recovered her composure, and a strange gleam appeared in her eyes. "The League of Demon Sealers, it's him." As of this moment, countless figures throughout the mountain and sea realm were making various speculations as to who it was that would bring such momentous changes in the future, the Lord of the mountain and sea realm. Some people were prepared to respectfully welcome such a person, others prepared to kill and supplant him. Various thoughts rose up in various minds. In addition, many people left their respective mountains and seas to fly toward the 9th mountain and sea. Everything was thrown into chaos in a single moment. An unprecedented commotion gripped all of the 9 mountains and seas. Currently, Meng Hao sat in his mountain valley, experiencing the same shock that everyone outside in the 9 mountains and seas was feeling. He could also hear the cry of the 9 Qianwu turtles. He was trembling, panting, his face covered with an expression of complete disbelief. The League of Demon Sealers. I can't believe it was actually founded by Paragon 9 Seals. Great waves of shock crashed through Meng Hao's heart. Never would he ever have speculated that the League of Demon Sealers had originated with such a shocking figure. Furthermore, he was the 9th-generation Demon Sealer. 9 was the ultimate number, and he was the final generation of the Demon Sealers. I'm the 9th-generation Demon Sealer, and this drop of blood comes from Paragon 9 Seals. He founded the League of Demon Sealers, which means he and I are connected by destiny. Meng Hao panted, and his mind trembled. The 9 hexes shall be inscribed. In the moment of his return to power, 9 hexes. That means that when I possess all 9 of the demon sealing hexing magics, then in that moment, I will be the Lord of the Mountain and Sea Realm. Meng Hao felt a bit dizzy. Even now he found it hard to believe. However, he wasn't struck senseless. In fact, in that moment, he was suddenly filled with a sense of impending danger. Expand. Imagine a situation in which an empire has no emperor for many years. The regional government officials throughout the country have their own military forces and occupy their positions for countless years. Each one of those government officials will eventually come to view the area they control as their own kingdom, and themselves as kings. That was the situation in the mountain and sea realm, with the lords of the 9 mountains and seas being 9 kings. The future lord of the mountain and sea realm was the emperor. None of those various kings would want to be ordered around after such a long time. After having a taste of freedom, they would balk at the thought of someone above them telling them what to do, nor would they accept the fate of being perpetually manipulated by another. When such circumstances arose in an empire then, the simplest and most effective way to deal with the situation, and also the method that would benefit most of the parties involved, would be to kill the emperor before he had a chance to return to power. That would be the best solution for all of those kings. Meng Hao knew that, and because he understood it, he could tell how much danger he was in and knew that he had to be completely on guard. Under no circumstances could he reveal his identity. If he did, then the only thing that would await him would be destruction, and he would no doubt drag the Fang clan down with him. It was at this point that the parrot and meat jelly began to holler. "Damn it, Meng Hao, hurry up and absorb it, we can't hold on much longer." Almost in that same moment, Meng Hao unhesitatingly reached out and grabbed the paragon's blood. Then he took a deep breath and shoved the drop of blood into the palm of his hand. Instantly, the drop of blood merged into his hand, fusing into his body. At the same time, massive rumbling filled his mind. He could immediately sense the boundless, mighty power contained within the paragon's blood. Simultaneously, the aura of the League of Demon Sealers erupted wildly. Trembling, Meng Hao quickly pulled out a nirvana fruit and then pushed it down onto his forehead. Rumbling echoed out as the nirvana fruit fused into him, and he began to shake. The paragon's blood and the aura of the League of Demon Sealers merged together, causing its paragon nature to be hidden away. It was in this moment that a terrifyingly powerful stream of divine sense spread out from the 9th mountain. It covered the entire 9th mountain and sea, reaching out to any and all locations, leaving no stone unturned. That included the 9 seas god world. The divine sense swept over it, apparently willing to pay any price in its search, even offending the 3 great Taoist societies. However, the 9 seas god world was uncharacteristically silent and did nothing to prevent it from happening. The divine sense covered over everything, swept through all regions. It even passed over Meng Hao, and yet it did not seem to find the aura it was looking for. Meng Hao sat there cross-legged, all traces of the aura covered up. Of course, it was not his own power that was doing the covering up, but rather the parrot and meat jelly, as well as the combination of the League of Demon Sealers' aura with the paragon's blood. Because of that, Meng Hao was not revealed underneath the powerful divine sense. After some time passed, the divine sense faded away to search in other areas. In addition to that powerful divine sense, the Tao realm experts in other areas of the 9th mountain and sea were also making searches in their respective areas. Everyone wanted to know the identity of the future lord of the mountain and sea realm. It wasn't that nobody considered that it could be Meng Hao. After all, he was in the echelon and was the most famous cultivator of his generation. However, the position of Lord of the Mountain and Sea Realm was far beyond his current level, so anyone who might suspect him would have only given it a moment of thought. The true object of most people's suspicion were the people who were already in the Tao realm. The lords of the other mountains and seas especially suspected Lord Jai. From the look of things, a massive storm was brewing. Meng Hao remained in secluded meditation the entire time. After successfully fusing with the Paragon's blood, he used the power of the blood to absorb the Nirvana fruit. At the same time, Paragon 9 Seals, blood caused his demon sealing magic to grow more exquisite. It was as if he had been the subject of righteous bestowal. He was the subject of Paragon 9 Seals, righteous bestowal. It was like a form of approval, formally initiating him as the 9th-generation demon sealer. From this moment on, his hexing magic would be even more powerful. Because of the amplification of the Paragon's blood, the pressure he could emit would be shockingly greater. Furthermore, his understanding regarding the League of Demon Sealers was now completely different than before. For example, when it came to the 5th demon sealing hex, the inside-outside hex, he had only been able to open a tiny rift before. Now, however, he could open a rift that was hundreds of times larger. Everything was because of Paragon 9 Seal's blood. Meng Hao was trembling. He could clearly sense that something was different about him. Absorbing the Paragon's blood was like a tempering or a baptism, causing his fleshly body to become more powerful, to exceed the limits of the immortal realm. He was now extremely close to having an ancient realm body. All he needed was the right set of circumstances, the right opportunity, and he would be able to break through. At that point, his fleshly body would break into the ancient realm. Furthermore, he knew exactly where that opportunity lay. It was in the 9th Golden Gate stone stele of the 9 Seas God world. Meng Hao could almost see what it would be like to withstand that old body cultivator's third fist strike. At that time, he would step into the ancient realm of the fleshly body. I'm going to get more powerful, he thought, his eyes gleaming. He continued to sit there meditating, his immortal meridians thrumming as the Paragon's blood seeped out into every corner of his body. Strands of golden thread quickly flew out to merge into his chi passageways. As for the Nirvana fruit which he had absorbed into his forehead, it rapidly melted, and when it touched the golden threads of the Paragon's blood, it fused with them, becoming part of Meng Hao. Suddenly, Meng Hao's cultivation base shot upward. He was already the immortal realm Paragon, but it went higher than that, taking him into the direction of the immortal emperor. Every step forward he took, he made incredible advancements. He would now be permanently in the immortal emperor realm, unlike before, when he could only be there for a short time by temporarily absorbing a nirvana fruit. Once I finish absorbing the nirvana fruit, I will eternally be within the immortal emperor realm. His eyes shone with determination. He had been waiting for this day for a very long time, and had spent countless amounts of spirit stones and immortal jade to get here. He couldn't even speak aloud the tally of how much he had spent. Anyone who heard the number would be unable to accept it, not even someone in the Tao realm. Because of that massive consumption, the path that Meng Hao traveled was completely different from that of other cultivators. He was treading the ancient path of the Paragon immortal realm. Because of that, his future was limitless. Time passed. Days. Meng Hao sat there cross-legged the entire time. Eventually, about half of the nirvana fruit was absorbed, placing him beyond the level of the immortal realm Paragon and closer to that of the immortal emperor. He was getting more and more powerful. His fleshly body reached new heights of perfection, breaking through barrier after barrier. Similarly, his powers from the League of Demon Sealers grew stronger. You could say that the single drop of Paragon's blood led to an explosive growth in all aspects for Meng Hao, making him vastly more powerful. Another 2 weeks passed. Meng Hao had now been in the 9 Seas God world for well over a month. Outside in the mountain and sea realm, the fervent search for the future realm lord was still underway. There were even powerful experts from the other mountains and seas who made appearances. Thankfully, everyone kept control of themselves and no major issues arose. However, the sense of an impending storm continued to grow more intense. During the half-month that passed, Meng Hao felt divine sense sweep over his location 4 times. Fortunately, the meat jelly and parrot knew that Meng Hao was at a critical juncture and did everything they could to keep him concealed. Also, from the moment that he had absorbed the blood, its aura had dissipated within him. Eventually, people stopped paying attention to him. Although he remained an object of suspicion, in truth there were over 100 such people under suspect. Actually, he would have been suspected no matter what the truth was. Another half a month passed, and Meng Hao still wasn't finished absorbing the nirvana fruit. There was still about 20% left. However, the difference between his current cultivation base and his cultivation base before was like the difference between heaven and earth. Currently, he sat in place, cross-legged, completely motionless. Countless sparks of electricity danced around him, and although his eyes were closed, streams of white mist seeped out from between his eyelids, making him appear extremely mysterious. His skin was whiter and his aura explosive. Terrifying ripples rolled off of him. The demonic cultivators in the pool of the water were in a state of shock, and when they looked at Meng Hao, terror filled their hearts. As for Su Yan, she was also astonished by the changes she had seen Meng Hao undergoing. It left her terrified. To her, it felt as if some mysterious will were currently awakening inside of him. He has a terrifying aura, she thought anxiously, but what exactly is it? As far as she was concerned, Meng Hao was completely enigmatic. Another half-month passed. Meng Hao had now been in the Nine Seas God world for more than 2 months. Eventually, the day came, when he finally absorbed the last bit of the nirvana fruit. The last trace of it faded away into Meng Hao, and a tremor ran through him. Along with the tremor were cracking sounds and a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering energy. In that moment, his cultivation base rocketed up to new heights of power. A massive wind sprung up around him, causing the demonic cultivators to shake. Su Yan's eyes went wide with disbelief. Meng Hao's energy caused his hair to whip around his head and his robes to flap. Gradually, something formed inside of him which was an imperial will. It was domineering to the maximum, towering. This was the imperial will of an immortal emperor realm. His eyes opened, and the demonic cultivators could hear something like peals of thunder. There were 8 thunderclaps in total, each one shocking to the extreme, causing strange colors to flash about and making everything shake. Blood sprayed out of the demonic cultivators' mouths, and some of them simply passed out. Su Yan found blood oozing out of the corners of her mouth, and her face fell completely. 8 illusory thunderclaps shaking the heavens, she said. You actually reached TH8 realm. This is impossible. Those peals of thunder are a terrifying sign that will appear when someone reaches the absolute pinnacle of the immortal realm. 8 illusory thunderclaps, shaking the heavens. Meng Hao took a deep breath and slowly stood up. As he did, the aura of the immortal emperor suddenly erupted out of him, causing the entire immortal's cave to shake. Even the 9th sea was trembling. The limit of the immortal realm, Meng Hao said coolly. Apparently you don't understand. The meaning of being immortal, the limit is far, far beyond this. His voice was calm and filled with a threatening pressure that far exceeded anything that had existed there before. Chapter 1057, Immortal Emperor Meng Hao. Chapter 1058, The Echelon Reacts. Any further pinnacle is still just the immortal realm, Su Yan replied through gritted teeth. You don't understand, said Meng Hao, shaking his head. The mark of the echelon had appeared on his forehead, sinking deeper into him with each pulsing flicker. Su Yan looked at the mark silently, her feelings clearly conflicted. Meng Hao rubbed his forehead, then turned to look at the wreckage of his residence. All of a sudden, he had realized something that appeared in his mind after absorbing the nirvana fruit completely. The word immortal is extremely profound, he murmured to himself. He suddenly raised his right hand, within which was a second nirvana fruit. He looked at it thoughtfully. I can sense that the primary function of the Paragon's blood was to provide true approval of me as part of the League of Demon Sealers. Paragon Sea Dream has her echelon. However, I am the sole member of Paragon 9 Seal's echelon. The strengthening of my fleshly body and the absorption of the nirvana fruit were side effects. Furthermore, after absorbing 1 drop of the blood, it wouldn't matter if I absorbed hundreds or thousands more. They wouldn't do anything. Also, I can't continue to use Paragon's blood to absorb nirvana fruits. Moreover, using Paragon's blood to do so is a huge waste. After a moment of thought, he probed his cultivation base to sense how vastly more powerful he was than before. A month or so ago, he had been an immortal realm paragon. Now he was above that, an immortal emperor. The current era had no such thing as an immortal emperor. In fact, even in the days of the immortal world, the immortal emperor realm was something rarely seen, like a level of complete perfection. It represented a level of profound understanding of the realm of immortality. Meng Hao might have only 123 immortal meridians, but each and every one had widened and become extremely sturdy. The feeling of power he was experiencing was something he previously could only feel on a temporary basis with the aid of nirvana fruit. Now, he was eternally within that realm. The echelon mark on his forehead glittered brightly and was clearly more firmly implanted. Because of that, he looked completely different than before. even had a new strange feeling. If he closed his eyes, he could almost sense that, far out in the vast mountain and sea realm and other areas, there were familiar fluctuations. Those fluctuations were not coming from a specific person. Rather, it came from other people who were like him, members of the echelon. In total, there were 12 other members of the echelon. He was the 13th member and the most recent one to be added. He was also the last member of the echelon. Before him, there were a total of 12. These were people from other locations in the mountain and sea realm, whom Paragon Sea Dream had pulled into the echelon. Meng Hao had no illusions about how difficult it was to become part of the echelon, nor how powerful its members were. After seeing the shocking and majestic sight of the first-generation patriarch, he could well imagine how powerful the other members were. It was only after Meng Hao received the enlightenment of Paragon magic that he had been able to join the echelon. Meng Hao could sense 12 fluctuations, and every one left him with a feeling like that of a paragon. The level of power caused his heart to sink. Now I see. Before, my cultivation base and realm simply did not qualify me to sense their existence. It is only now that I have reached the proper degree to do so. Furthermore, that means that as of this moment, not only can I sense them, they can also sense me, he frowned. By the time that Meng Hao frowned, the flurry of activity that had resulted from the events the previous month had died down. There were still many people who were paying attention to the situation, but the most tense juncture had passed. Life went on. The sun and the moon went back into motion, almost as if nothing had happened. However, deep in the hearts of many people, questions still lurked about who the future lord of the mountain and sea realm was. In the 8th mountain and sea was a location out in the void that was comprised of a vast field of skeletons that almost looked like puppets. Their eyes flickered with ghost fire as they swirled around. In the very center of all of them was an enormous palace constructed of bones. Within that palace, a young man in a black robe sat there cross-legged, meditating. He was extremely gaunt, and his face was as pale as death, completely lacking even a trace of color. Furthermore, the flame of his life force was very dim. Suddenly, his eyes opened, and all of the skeletons surrounding the palace dropped down to kowtow. At the same time, a terrifying energy surged out from the young man. A mark appeared on his forehead, flickering brightly. All of a sudden, he could sense something within the 9th mountain and sea, the fluctuations of the echelon. So there's actually a 13th member, he murmured, and a sinister glow like that of blood appeared in his eyes. At the same time, a massive vortex could be seen in the 4th mountain and sea. A handsome young man in a blue garment sat cross-legged in that vortex, meditating. He was surrounded by 10 old men, all of whom were at the peak of the ancient realm. Clearly, these men were the Tao protectors of the younger man. Roughly 3,000 meters away from him in the vortex was a young woman clad in a simple white gown. Her cultivation base was not in the immortal realm, but rather the nascent soul stage. However, there was an aura to her that ensured that, despite being inside the vortex, she wasn't harmed at all. She sat there, her eyes closed as she practiced cultivation. Next to the young woman was an old lady who looked like a servant of some sort. She sat there quietly, completely ignoring the young man and his 10 Tao protectors. After a long moment passed, the young man in blue opened his eyes and looked at the young woman in white. His eyes flickered with a mysterious light, and he suddenly approached her, after which he clasped hands and bowed deeply. "Miss Su, we meet again. I, Lin Kong, offer greetings to the 49th princess of the underworld." 1. This might cause some readers to recall what was said by K. Siddhagarbha in chapter 982. The young woman in white opened her eyes and looked at the young man. After giving him a slight smile, she closed her eyes again. The young man smiled back, seemingly having taken no offense. However, when he turned away, a sinister gleam could be seen deep in his eyes. He was just about to leave when, all of a sudden, an echelon mark suddenly appeared on his forehead, and he could sense that there was now another member of the echelon in the mountain and sea realm. The 9th mountain and sea he's much weaker than any of the others. Killing intent flickered in the young man's eyes. Similar scenes played out one after another in other locations in the other mountains and seas. Just as Meng Hao had suspected, the other 12 members of the echelon were all able to sense him. Competition was something that came with the status of being in the echelon itself. Plus, there were also people in the outside world who wanted to kill those echelon members and take their status for their own. Such an attitude was even stronger among the echelon members as well. To them, weak people weren't qualified to stand among them. Although nobody who was truly weak was allowed to even join the echelon, Any member who didn't make progress quickly enough would soon be left behind and eventually eliminated. On the first mountain was a young man with ordinary features. However, on his forehead could be seen a third eye. He currently sat in front of a Go board, holding a game piece in his hand, apparently lost in thought. In front of him was a young woman wearing a long, emerald-green gown. She was so beautiful that it was impossible for anyone to compare to her. She had an alluring figure and phoenix-like eyes that radiated a vigorous spirit. The wind slowly blew her long black hair, causing a single strand to gently sweep across her chest. The cosmetics she wore added a bit of color to her face, making her cheeks slightly rosy. She was both lithe and tender, and overall completely attractive. She was like a butterfly fluttering in the wind or a fairy floating across the snow. She was the type of woman who, wherever she went, the flowers darkened, the sun and moon dimmed, and all other women somehow looked less beautiful. She was also surrounded by immortal chi, which slowly swirled around her, causing her to seem completely extraordinary. "Elder brother Chen, it looks like you're going to lose this game too," she said with a smile. It was a smile that made her consummate beauty even more attractive. The wind that was blowing past seemed unwilling to part with her, and instead continued to swirl around her. "The world is like a game of Go," the man said lightly, "and life is like a dream. Each stone that is played must be played with extreme thought and precision. Miss Zhuer, you truly deserve to be the #1 successor of Immortal Ancient. You've experienced the wide world in your long travels, and the gracefulness of every step you take causes lotuses to bloom." He looked up at the young woman and smiled slightly. 1. The Zhu in this young woman's name is Chinese letter Zhu meaning snow. "Miss Zhuer," the man said coolly, "among the 12 members of the echelon, you came to find me first. Then you left to travel across the mountain and sea realm, and now you've come to find me again. It seems like I'm the chosen one. Unfortunately, I can't find anyone who can beat me at this game. Elder brother Chen, among all the other members of the echelon, you are the one who can hold out the longest. Since that's the case, well." The young woman lapsed into silence for a moment. Finally, she nodded and was about to continue speaking when, all of a sudden, her expression flickered. Simultaneously, the refined young man with whom she was speaking also looked surprised. An echelon mark appeared on his forehead, and he was suddenly able to sense the fluctuations from Meng Hao in the 9th mountain and sea. "A new member. Too bad he's far too weak." After a moment, the man paid no further attention to Meng Hao. Instead, he looked at the young woman in front of him. Although his expression was placid, inwardly, he was a bit nervous. The young woman didn't say anything in response. She looked down at the Go board for a moment, then back up at the man. Finally, she stood up and waved her hand, causing the game board to vanish. "Since a new member of the echelon has appeared, I'm going to go extend greetings. I want to see if I'm connected to this person by destiny. Elder brother Chen. If I have no destiny with him, then I'll come find you again to discuss the Tao." "A person that weak. Wouldn't it be a waste of your time, Miss Zhuer?" the man said slowly. "The first time I found you, Elder brother Chen, you did not have the cultivation base you have now either." The woman smiled, then turned and made her way off into the distance. The man she called Elder brother Chen sat there quietly for a long moment. Finally, a glow of self-confidence appeared in his eyes, which he then closed. Meng Hao's debut into the echelon gave rise to a variety of intense reactions among the other members. At the same time, in the other Taoist societies in the other 8 mountains and seas, there were people who suddenly became aware that there was a new member of the echelon. A true member of the echelon was difficult to produce. Someone who wasn't qualified to remain in the echelon and yet received an echelon mark would not be accepted. Meng Hao, after successfully absorbing his first nirvana fruit, finally, was acknowledged as being a true member of the echelon. Also, he was now placed within the hearts and minds of the other members. Currently, Meng Hao was in the 9 seas god world in the 9th mountain and sea. His eyes glittered, and he muttered to himself. Finally, he put the matter of the echelon aside and focused fully on himself. "An ancient realm expert below 5 extinguished soul lamps would not be a match for me," he thought, his eyes shining as he looked down at the nirvana fruit in his hand. "I wonder if it would be possible to continue and absorb a second nirvana fruit. If I could exceed the power of the immortal emperor, I wonder what realm that would be." The mere thought filled Meng Hao with excitement. He lifted the nirvana fruit up and without any further hesitation pushed it into his forehead. Rumble/expand. In the current mountain and sea realm, the pinnacle of the immortal realm was the paragon. After opening 123 immortal meridians and forming 33 heavens, one could step into that ultimate realm of immortality. That was the highest place in the modern age. Meng Hao was the only one who had currently reached that level, surpassing the achievements of the most powerful of the mountain and sea lords, Siddhagarbha of the fourth mountain and sea. Perhaps with the assistance of various techniques and divine abilities, future powerhouses might be able to brush against this kind of power. But Meng Hao had reached immortality by corroborating the Tao on his own. That was a higher level that no one could match. However, although the immortal realm paragon was the highest level in the modern age, in ancient times, when the immortal world did not consist of 9 mountains and seas within the heavens and the starry sky, there was a level higher than that of the paragon, and that was the immortal emperor. The term immortal emperor was not just a title, but rather a realm. Before, Meng Hao could enter that realm temporarily with a nirvana fruit. Now that he had permanently absorbed the nirvana fruit, his place within that realm was stable and, in fact, eternal. However, the realm of the immortal emperor was actually not the ultimate level. Above that realm were 2 more legendary realms. Only a minuscule number of people had actually reached those realms. Even in the heyday of the immortal world, it would be easier to find a phoenix feather or a killing horn than such a person. Above the immortal emperor was the all-heaven emperor immortal. Then, above the all-heaven emperor immortal, was the all-heaven Tao immortal. 1. All-heaven is a term that came up once before in chapter 1026, although at that time I translated it as Luotian heaven. Luotian Chinese letter is a concept from real Taoist mythology. Among all the various heavens that exist, it is the absolute highest heaven. Luo Chinese letter is a character which can be translated a lot of ways, but in this situation basically means net. The idea is that this heaven stretches out to cover over all the other heavens like a net. However, instead of calling it net heaven, sounds like a bad internet cafe or perhaps a fishing shop, I will use all heaven. Incidentally, I've also translated the character Luo Chinese letter as Civ in the past, most notably in the name of the Black Civ sect. It was difficult to become the all-heaven emperor immortal, and as for becoming the all-heaven Tao immortal, that was extremely difficult. The all-heaven Tao immortal was the ultimate and absolute peak of the immortal realm. It was a realm that could overthrow experts at the peak of the ancient realm, and even shake powerful experts of the Tao realm. A person like this, who actually surpassed an entire realm, was a superpower who, regardless of where they lived or what era they lived in, would be the complete focus of all attention. Unfortunately, all-heaven emperor immortals were extremely rare, even more rare than members of the Tao realm. All-heaven Tao immortals were even rarer. In fact, throughout the entire history of the immortal world, from ancient times till now, there had only ever been 9. As for those 9 people, even the 3 supreme paragons would treat them with courtesy. That was because, according to the ancient legends of the immortal world, all-heaven Tao immortals were the root of the entire immortal world. If a person such as that became a true paragon, they would exist as the summit of the starry sky. In fact, it was because Paragon 9 Seals had formerly been an all-heaven emperor immortal that he eventually became the chief among the paragons. If someone was able to become a paragon via the path of the all-heaven Tao immortal, that would be something that had never been done, not from ancient times until now. It was vastly too difficult. When an all-heaven Tao immortal entered the ancient realm, the likelihood of failing and extinguishing their soul lamps and then dying was vastly higher than other members of the ancient realm. In fact, it was almost a certainty. There was virtually no hope to survive. Because of that, it was essentially impossible to enter the ancient realm or step into the Tao realm. From ancient times until now, of the 9 all-heaven Tao immortals that had existed, 5 had died in the ancient realm, having failed to extinguish their soul lamps. As for the other 4, they either died or went missing in the great catastrophe. In the past, one of the paragons had attempted to determine exactly how all-heaven immortals appeared in the immortal world, but were unable to turn up any clues. There was only one thing that was for certain. If someone had an ancestor who had already become an all-heaven immortal, even just an all-heaven emperor immortal, then the chances of that person being able also succeed were extremely high. Similarly, if someone had an ancestor who was an all-heaven Tao immortal, then that person was also much more likely to reach that same level. It was almost like an inherited bloodline. In fact, it was said that if you search through the most ancient of histories, you would find that everything had its source in 9 family names. 1. I'm sure the reference to the 9 families will cause some readers to recall chapter 160, which happened to be titled No Meng and the 9 Families. Ages ago, the paragon who had been researching the matter discovered that fact, and was instantly struck with fear and gave up the research. It was almost as if there were some unfathomable consciousness attempting to prevent the truth from being revealed. By now, many ages had passed since the destruction of the immortal world. Before Meng Hao, no immortal emperor had ever appeared. As for all heaven immortals, they were naturally a thing of legend. In fact, it was something that most people had already forgotten. But now, as soon as the nirvana fruit made contact with Meng Hao's forehead, a tremor ran through him. A tempest exploded within his mind, massive rumbling that made him feel as if he might explode at any moment. His fleshly body grew larger. In the blink of an eye, he was 9 meters tall. It didn't stop there, though. He continued growing until he was 15 meters tall, then 24 meters. Even as he grew, he felt as if his flesh and blood were being ripped to shreds. He shook violently, and if it weren't for his incredible willpower, he would be screaming. Icy, painful sweat broke out all over his body, and blood oozed out of his pores. The blood and sweat mingled together, until Meng Hao actually looked like he was made completely of blood. Despite the pain, an incredible fleshly body power exploded out within him. He could feel himself breaking through barriers, exceeding limitations. His heart pounded and his body shook as incredible power surged through him. Those were just the changes to his fleshly body. A moment later, a windstorm spread out within him, causing him to stagger backward. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as the intense, terrifying windstorm caused his immortal power to surge. He suddenly realized that his physical growth just now was only the beginning. The true change was happening to his cultivation base. He staggered backward, coughing up successive mouthfuls of blood. He looked like he was completely made of blood, and the windstorm raged inside of him, making him feel like he was being torn apart. All of his chi passageways felt like they were about to explode. The power was too intense, leaving Meng Hao completely shocked. It was as if this was not the power of the nirvana fruit, but rather power from his bloodline. The nirvana fruit was only a key that unlocked the vast and terrifying power that was locked inside of his blood. "This," he murmured, alarmed. Massive rumbling filled him that no outsider would be able to hear. However, to Meng Hao, it was ear-splitting. Next, he could sense that his 123 immortal meridians were, all of a sudden fusing together to form only one single immortal meridian. That single immortal meridian formed a framework inside of him that was a perfect circle. As the circle formed, Meng Hao's cultivation base experienced unprecedented, maddening growth. In the blink of an eye, he was far, far past the immortal emperor level. His surging energy and terrifying aura exploded to new heights. As the rumbling echoed out, it eventually reached a point where Meng Hao couldn't handle it anymore. He threw his head back and let out a terrifying howl. The howl gave vent to the tempest inside of him, sweeping across everything in the area. The wreckage of his residence was transformed into ash, and the stone chambers simply vanished. The parrot looked on with wide, disbelieving eyes. "All-Heaven Immortal, you're actually an All-Heaven Immortal. Damn it, I can't believe you possess that type of bloodline, Meng Hao. Who is your ancestor?" "Fang Clan. Fang Clan, damn it, why didn't I think of this before?" The parrot squawked anxiously, flapping its wings and causing a protective shield to form over the shocked demonic cultivators. The meat jelly was also trembling, and it suddenly had an impulse to bow in worship to Meng Hao, an urge that could not be wiped out within the cycle of reincarnation. Su Yan stared in shock, her mind reeling, and her expression one of extreme astonishment. It was at this point that Meng Hao roared again, which caused an azure color to appear around him. That azure color was the ultimate color, and was the most respected color in the immortal world. That was because azure represented the All-Heaven, and the All-Heaven represented the infinite. As of this moment, Meng Hao was radiating resplendent, azure light, as well as the imperial will of the immortal emperor. An incomparably domineering air rose up from him. If you liken the imperial will of the immortal emperor to that of an actual emperor of an earthly empire, then currently, the explosive energy which radiated out from Meng Hao made him so domineering that he could lord over a planet as if it were a kingdom. In one moment the imperial will raged. In the next moment, Meng Hao's eyes darkened and his body suddenly deflated. Based on the explosive energy, if he took just a single more step, he would be in the realm of the All-Heaven Emperor Immortal. However, all of that energy suddenly faded away. The second nirvana fruit emerged from his forehead and smacked down onto the ground. Meng Hao's body shrank back down from a height of roughly 30 meters, back to his normal height. His immortal meridian also split apart and once again formed 123 separate meridians. Everything went back to normal in the blink of an eye. Meng Hao coughed up a mouthful of blood and he doubled over. His vision began to go black, and he began to slip into a coma. As he faded into unconsciousness, he smiled bitterly. Doing what he had just done was a bit rash. However, when he was able to experience the realm available when he absorbed the second nirvana fruit, that level of power filled him with excitement, madness, and desire. He didn't know how much time passed before he woke up. When he opened his eyes, he saw the parrot and meat jelly staring at him. They looked almost like they could see all the way through him, and their eyes were glittering brightly. They looked happy, even excited to see him. "What are you looking at?" he asked, gaping. The look in the meat jelly's eyes was the same look it usually got when it saw bullies. As for the parrot, it looked the way it did when it saw luxuriantly furred or feathered creatures. Meng Hao's scalp tingled and his face flickered. He looked down to see that his clothes were in tatters but still remained covering him. He didn't feel anything strange anywhere in his body, so finally, he let out a sigh of relief. Although he didn't like to speak about the parrot's unique proclivities, inwardly, he was well aware of them and was always on guard. "An all-heaven immortal," the parrot said excitedly. "Yowza, I never thought you would become an all-heaven immortal." "All-heaven immortal," said Meng Hao, staring in surprise. Then he thought back to what it felt like to absorb that second nirvana fruit, and he smiled. Not a bad name. With that, he stood up. Cracking sounds echoed out in all directions as his eternal stratum went to work, rapidly restoring him to his usual state. "Meng Hao," said the parrot solemnly, "Lord Fifth assumed that you were like all the other masters of the copper mirror. All of the masters I've had have never been able to take the mirror beyond the first step and into the second. But now, if you can become an all-heaven Tao immortal, then you can take the copper mirror into its second state. It can become a battle weapon." Chapter 1059, All-Heaven Tao Immortal.